Ordinary people in their normal state perceive the world in 3 dimensions. With the development of awareness, the ability to perceive the world also expands, so intuition is the ability to perceive the world as a 4-dimensional space, or, in other words, the space of time and the events in it. The ability to envision the likelihood of future events is the perception of the world as 5-dimensional space, etc. Regular 3-dimensional world is called physical, multidimensional world is called the subtle world. The higher the dimension of space, the more high frequency it is. In 3-dimensional space, objects can be processed and given necessary and useful properties, just as it is possible in multidimensional space. For example, by processing wood, we create comfortable furniture. By processing metal or plastic, machinery is created. By adding extra properties to an object in a multidimensional space, you can control their effect on other objects, including people. This work can only be done by someone who has the ability to perceive the multidimensional nature of the world and is able to function in it. Artifacts are objects of the material world that affect the properties of the surrounding space and people who come into contact with them, and this influence does not fit into the laws of modern science. In ancient times, artifacts were created at a more complicated technical level. Currently, such technical basis doesn't exist. Artifacts created at that time usually have useful properties for a person, normalizing health indicators, protection against negative influence, establishing family affairs or business affairs, etc. Such artifacts enhance the energy of the body and mind, activate vision, accelerate the development of awareness, and are the tools that facilitate the influence on other objects and people. Since childhood, we are familiar with stories about these artifacts and dream about them. As a child, all we want is a magic wand, a magic mirror, a magic apple and magic water. In adulthood, we learn about other artifacts, the search for which led to wars and upheavals around the world. The Ark of the Covenant, the Grail, the Philosopher's Stone, the Spear of Longinus, the Ring of Gyges, the Book of Thoth. Thousands of people are still searching for these artifacts. But they do not understand, or perhaps do not want to understand, that everything in this world is natural and predetermined. You can't own an artifact if you're not destined to own it. Once in the wrong hands, the artifact begins to resist and destroys its new owner, forcing the new owner to return the artifact to the rightful one. Therefore, the history of many artifacts is the history of wars and murders. Only in the hands of the rightful owner does the artifact recovers its inherent properties. At first glance, an ancient artifact may seem like an ordinary, unremarkable item. No wonder. After all, artifacts have long been created only for a certain owner and served only them. Artifacts can recognize the owner themselves. They are able to recognize the energy of a person, determine the owner among outsiders. Such artifacts were most often passed down in the family from generation to generation. Sometimes they were given out, for example, a teacher would give it to a student. Once in the wrong hands, the artifact not only does not show its useful magical properties or remains neutral, it can also do a lot of harm, such as causing failures, illnesses, or even the death of an unwary person. In the book, The Jewish Stone, I was telling about 3 paintings by Yudavin presented to my grandfather and the secret information encrypted in them, which has not yet been deciphered. The book, The Jewish Stone, is a continuation of the book, The Ring of King Solomon, which ends with a story of how my family left the Soviet Union and took out our family relics with us. I started writing the 3rd book after the amazing events that took place in Canada, where we moved from Israel. It all started with a dream that I had. As a doctor, I know that science still cannot explain the cause of strange dreams. Perhaps its function is filtering information to improve learning and memory function. Or, maybe, the dreams are an expanded state of consciousness that goes beyond our normal thinking. They help us remove restrictions and excessive control in thoughts, emotions, and body responses. We can't control many functions of the body and soul, they manifest themselves independently, and it is impossible to have any control over them. More than 90% of people have experienced so-called obsessive thoughts in their lives. These are variable, inappropriate thoughts or images that occur in our head against our will. They usually demand something, inform or upset the person. Doctors know that it's best to acknowledge these thoughts and let them gradually disappear. This is one of the functions of the body and soul that we can't control. There are a lot of bodily functions that we also cannot control. Most of us lose up to 100 hairs from our heads every day. Important thing is to keep this process low scale, otherwise it would indicate health problems. Nails grow faster than toenails. In addition, they grow faster on the right hand in right-handed people, and in left-handed people they do on the left. Their growth is approximately 2.5 millimeters monthly, thus, it may take 3 to 6 months for the nail to be completely replaced. Interestingly, nails also grow faster during the day and in the summer, which suggests that their growth rate may be associated with improved blood circulation. So-called goose bumps can occur due to cold, as well as a result of strong emotions such as shock, fear, anxiety, or even inspiration. You've probably seen some animals' fur bristle when they want to scare off an enemy. These are remnants of an evolutionary process, back at the times when people had fur on the body. The muscles in the lower part of each hair follicle contract, causing the hair to stand on end. The cause of yawning is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries of the human body. There are several theories. One of them claims that yawning is a natural reflex of the body that allows you to inhale more oxygen. Another theory is that yawning affects the thermoregulation of the brain and hence is need to help it cool down. One more, we can't control the formation of saliva. Saliva is important for oral health and digestion. Its purpose is to moisten and soften food so that it is easier to swallow. In addition, saliva improves oral hygiene by preventing infections and tooth decay. But what is saliva? It's mostly water with some chemicals and enzymes in. It is produced by the salivary glands, which secrete from 1 to 2 liters of this fluid every day. Another one for you, we cannot control the formation and production of skin fat. It is necessary for the skin to be properly hydrated to be healthy. If we vigorously scrub with antibacterial soap, we harm the healthy barrier of the skin and dry it out. Our sebaceous glands produce this fat to lubricate and waterproof the skin, as well as to protect it from environmental pollution and free radicals. A person cannot control the exfoliation of the skin cells. During the day, we lose almost 1 million of these cells, or 30 to 40,000 every hour. This organic material is the main source of dust in the room, although one interesting study showed that dead skin cells can also be useful. They allegedly chemically react with ozone, which purifies the air. There are more than 1 trillion bacteria in a human body, thousands of different types. Due to their abundance, these friendly microbes can stop the development of all sorts of infections. For example, when the intestinal flora is normal, our bodies are healthy. Human body is a hotbed of activity for all kinds of microscopic creatures. Just like that, we can't control the presence of microbes. It all started with a dream that I had, and this dream referred to the functions of the soul that a person cannot control. Did this dream come to me by accident? I don't think so. As a Jew, I believe in God, and the word chance, in my understanding, is one of the aliases of God. Everything in this world is natural and predetermined. By giving a man free will, God gave them a possibility for disobedience and sin. Indeed, the first people whom God placed in the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden in Hebrew, see also paradise, contrary to God's prohibition, ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and were expelled from paradise as a punishment. Having learned the difference between good and evil, a man gained the ability to choose and became a being responsible for his actions in the eyes of God. Since this point on, the law of causality arises in the relationship between God and man to a certain extent. The cause is actions of a human, and the consequence is God's mercy, reward, or punishment. Obedience and good deeds entail mercy and reward, and disobedience and misdeeds bring punishment. Human history is a continuous chain of indignation and revolt against God, which bring his anger and severe penalties upon the human race. Human rebellious spirit complicates the course of history, but it cannot change God's predestination. Chance is an unknown pattern. We have no influence over patterns. But a person has a choice. Here is an example. If a person is destined to shed blood, then who are they to become? A bandit, to kill people, or a surgeon, to save people's lives? This choice must be made by the person themselves. So says my father, so said my grandfather. When we can't explain why something happened, we say, it's an accident and that's all, and it's clear to everyone. Geneticists from the University of California at Santa Cruz, USA, have discovered a unique gene in human DNA, Notch2NL, which is responsible for the presence of a large brain in humans and the unique structure of the cerebral cortex. The full text of the study is published in the Cell magazine. The genomes of chimpanzees and humans are 99% identical, but humans have completely different neural endings. The main features of a person are the large size of the brain and the slow development of the nervous system inside the mother's womb. David Haussler of the University of California, Santa Cruz. In the section of the genetic code studied by scientists, there is a set of genes from the Notch2 family, which is responsible for the development of preneurons and the formation of the future brain in the embryo. At the same time, humans have one gene that other primates do not have, Notch2NL, which appeared in our ancestors about 4 million years ago. Accidentally during an error when copying the first chromosome, so scientists believe, the gene was copied and accidentally embedded in the DNA of the first Homo. It did not affect the body in any way and became a junk gene. The next, random, error led to the fact that a new section of DNA appeared in the genome of proto-humans because of an extra gene. It radically changed the program of development of the nervous system. A single stem cell involved in brain growth can give birth to 2 neurons or another blank and 1 nerve cell. Notch2NL forces them to choose the second option, which allowed our brain to grow in volume. As it often happens in the history of evolution, a small, random, change in the functioning of stem cells has led to very large consequences, scientists say. It was 1167, and Lazarus, a rich goldsmith, was sitting in his workshop by the light of a tallow candle, examining a stone, the history of which had haunted him since his early childhood. This stone came to him from his father, who received it from his father. The stone has been passed down from father to son for many generations. A flat stone with a non-man-made image of a person's face was kept in his family for many generations, and carried a secret, the key to which was lost over time. Many mysteries surrounded Lazarus ben Baruch, 1. And many of these secrets, if someone found out about them, could cost him his life. Even his real name, he was afraid to say out loud. He was so used to the name Lazarus Bogshaw that if he was woken up in the middle of the night and asked, "What's your name?" the answer would be, Lazarus Bogshaw. He knew from his father's stories that the stone was jasper, and that their family came from the tribe of Benjamin. In 1064, 3,000 Khazar families moved to Transcaucasia, and then some of these Khazar Jewish families migrated to the countries of Central Europe. About 100 years ago his ancestors decided to remain in Polotsk, where they were baptized, changed their names, but just as Morans in Spain they still secretly professed Judaism. Goldsmiths are needed in any country. The secrets of this family trade were passed down through generations. Lazarus was the best goldsmith. Therefore, Euphrosyne of Polotsk entrusted him with making a precious altar cross with relics for the Spaso-Preobrazhensky Cathedral of the Spasskaya Monastery. The cross was an ark for storing Christian relics. The cross was made of cypress wood and had a 6-pointed shape. It was covered with gold plates on the front and back, and with silver plates on the sides. The gold plates were decorated with the finest enamel faces of saints, ornamented with gems, and around the perimeter of the cross there was an amazing string of large pearls. The cross made by Lazarus was a 6-pointed cross with a length of 51 centimeters. The upper cross section is 14 centimeters, the lower one is 21 centimeters. Its base was made of wood, on which silver, gilded and gold plates were stuffed. The front side of the cross had 9 rectangular, 2-figured, central, plates and 2 small crosses stuffed in the center of the middle crosses, one 4-pointed, the other 6-pointed. The reverse side also had 9 rectangular plates and 2 figured ones. All the plates on the front and back were gold. The side plates were made so that their edges curved to the front and back of the cross and were fitted to the corresponding plates of these sides. They were made of gilded silver. All the plates were fastened neatly with small nails. Lazarus perfectly mastered the technique of decorating with thin enamels. That was one of his advantages compared to other goldsmiths. Princess Ephrasinia highly valued him as a master, and trusted only him to make frames for the books she had copied with her own hand. This was not just a great honor, but also a princely payment. The cross made by Master Lazarus had no engraved ornaments. All the plates of its flat sides were decorated with thin enamels representing images of saints, round, square, triangular palmettes, etc. In addition to enamels, the gold plates of the front side of the cross had 8 oval holes where Lazarus inserted large gems. The same amount of small gems was found at the corners of the small crosses that laid above the parts of the honest tree. The gold plates on the back of the cross had 4 rectangular cutouts for inserting hallows. The middle cross of the front side of the cross was decorated with small plate crosses, ornamented with small openings. The cross of the upper middle crossing was smaller and had a 4-pointed shape. The cross of the lower middle crossing was decorated and had a larger 6-pointed shape. On the front and back sides Lazarus made enamels completely repeating the drawings of Princess Euphrosyne that she gave him. On the front side of the figures formed the so-called large or expanded deisis, Jesus Christ, in a green chiton, the Mother of God in a blue chiton with a green halo and hands adoringly turned inside the cross to the upper middle cross, John the Baptist in a blue chiton with a spatulate beard and hands also turned to the middle cross, for evangelists in blue robes with their hands also turned to the center of the cross, archangels Michael and Gabriel in green tunics with blue halos. The first had no facial hair, the other had a beard. Mikhail holding a rod in his hands. On the next 3 lower plates of the cross, located on the lower trunk, there were the images of saints. On the top plate there was the image of Saint Euphrosyne of Alexandria, the name of this saint the Polotsk princess took when she gave the vows. In the middle there was Saint George in a military dress with a 4-pointed cross in hand and with a small tiara on his head, and on the lower one, Saint Sophia in a blue chiton with a red 4-pointed cross. That saint was the patroness of the mother of Euphrosyne. For inscriptions of the upper middle crossings were made in enamel technique, J.C. Nika, as well as ornamental rosettes. The decorations were dominated by blue, white, red, and green tones. The reverse side of the cross depicted the founders of Orthodoxy, John Chrysostom with a 6-pointed cross and the Gospel in his hands, Basil the Great also with the Gospel, across from him the image of Gregory the theologian. On the plate of the upper middle cross there was a sepulchre of the Holy Virgin. He carved images of Peter and Paul on the plates of the lower crossbar of the cross. The lower trunk of the cross, like the front side, contained 3 golden plates on which there were enamel images of Saint Stephen with a halo and a scroll in one of the hands. Dimitri had a 4-pointed cross in his right hand, and Pantalaimon was depicted with a nimbus, chiton and an ark placed in the hands of the saint. The relics of these saints he placed in the cross, according to the desire of the princess. Euphrosyne received these relics directly from Byzantium. The princess of Polotsk was related to the Byzantine imperial house, Manuel Komnenos, and received relics from him as a gift, along with an icon made by the evangelist Luke. The icon of the Virgin of Ephesus is one of 3 icons created by the first Christian iconographer, the Apostle Luke, during the life of the Virgin Mary. On the back side of the cross Lazarus made more ornamental enamels than on the front, where a significant space is occupied by gems. One of the plates, between the middle crosses, consisted entirely of enamel cruciform palmettes. Lazarus enamels had one feature that strongly distinguished them from the enamels that other goldsmiths made. This secret was in the method of soldering enamel partitions not on a separate plate, which was then attached to the object, but on the plate of the object itself. As a jeweler who was used to making small jewelry, he did all the work by himself. This is what the princess valued his work for. The master did not make enamels on individual plates that were then attached to the object, but directly on the plates of the cross itself. He made the enamels in full accordance with the princess's special order for this item. Although there were differences in the images themselves, one can feel the difference with the canons, but the princess liked it and even allowed to indicate on the cross not only the name of the goldsmith who made this cross, but also the amount of donation that went to its production. It was a great honor for Lazarus Bogshaw. According to the wish of the princess, on the sides of the cross there was an inscription containing the date of year 1161, the name of the customer and a terrible curse to anyone who dares to encroach on this shrine. Let it never be carried away from the monastery. And if anyone disobeys and carries the cross, let there be no honest cross help for him either in this age or in the future. The text of the spell was a common form used in letters of introduction to churches and monasteries. On the back of the cross in small letters, he carved his name, Lazarus Bogshaw, as well as the amount spent on its production, 140 kopeck. In general, the inscription, like all the product, had the goal of glorifying Euphrosyne, which was associated with her desire to preserve it forever. Therefore, according to the wish of Euphrosyne, he indicated the amount spent on its production, 140 kopeck, as well as the price of individual works invested in the product. The price was unusually high. The description of the value of the cross begins with the most valuable part of the tree from the Holy Sepulchre, which is priceless. The following lists all the material that went into making the cross. It is reported that forging, gold, silver, gems and pearls decorating the cross were worth 100 kopeck, and 40 kopeck were paid to the master in the form of a fee. He was in need of money at this very moment. He didn't just sit there and stare at the jasper stone he had received from his father's hands. The day before, he had a dream in which he saw his father. His father reminded him of this stone and its purpose. When he woke up, he remembered many times what his father had said to him. Lazarus went through every word in his memory, pondered their meanings and understood the responsibility that now was his. The stone is the key to a priceless treasure. They are not gems, nor are they gold or silver. This is the half of a sheet of parchment enclosed in an old book, which is placed in a simple silver casket. On this casket the prohibition to open the casket to the uninitiated is written in Hebrew. What is written on this sheet of parchment, my father did not have time to tell me. The dream was interrupted. The only thing that my father managed to say was that the book in which this parchment is enclosed is the writing, on the properties of food, created by Simeon Seth. Lazarus read it in the library of the Princess Euphrosyne. In early childhood Euphrosyne was already taught the princely writing, which then included such subjects as reading, writing, counting, as well as Latin and Greek and Hebrew languages. In the process of training, Euphrosyne showed extraordinary abilities. She understood science much better than other relatives. The prince's daughter had wide access to books. Even in her parents' home, in addition to liturgical and other religious literature, she could read The Chosen Ones, with sayings and aphorisms, Alexandria, a novel translated from Greek about the exploits of Alexander the Great, an action-packed story about Akira the Wise. Every year, the books that the girl was interested in became deeper and wiser. Euphrosyne studied medicine with particular eagerness using the writings of Byzantine theorists and works of Arabic medicine. She used translations done by Egyptian authors, and as a youth she wanted to go study in Alexandria. Lazarus was not only the best goldsmith, but he was also an excellent physician. He got his knowledge from his mother. His passion for medicine brought him closer to the prince's daughter. Despite the large age difference, their relationship had become trusting and friendly. Lazarus looked at Jasper in silence and thought, "Where do I start? Who can help? Who can I trust?" He was well aware of the complexity of the task. The trip to Jerusalem, the search, and all the difficulties associated with it. The only person who knew that he read Hebrew and that he was from a family of baptized Jews was Princess Euphrosyne. After thinking it all over, he said to himself, "There is no other way." May 23, 1167, 2. Lazarus is sitting at the bedside of the sick and dying Euphrosyne. They have something to remember and talk about. In a voice weakened by illness, Euphrosyne tells Lazarus about her dream. The angel who appeared to me in a dream announced not only my death today, but also the serenity that was prepared for me. He has instructed me to convey your father's blessing to you. Placing a weak hand on Lazarus' head, Euphrosyne blessed him. The princess continued, I am grateful to you for trusting me and giving me the opportunity to participate in the work of God. I don't know if you can find the casket, but I know that our work will not be in vain. The angel told me that this parchment belonged to King Solomon. He was the one to write on it and point to where the countless treasures are, with a map of how to find them. Having said this, Euphrosyne closed her eyes, and did not open them again. Lazarus got up when the brother and sister of Euphrosyne came with the holy water of the Jordan. Lazarus quietly left the monastic cell and let the siblings say their goodbyes. Lazarus has not stopped his search for a single day. He came looking to the dealers in antiquities, to the rabbis, but there was no result. No one had even heard of the casket. Lazarus was walking slowly through the streets of Jerusalem, lost in thought. He didn't even notice that he was on Cardo Street. Cardo is the second main street in the layout of Jerusalem. It runs from north to south, perpendicular to the main street of the city, Decumanus, which runs from west to east. The width of Cardo Street was 22.5 m. 2 colonnades were built along the street with covered sidewalks for pedestrians. The roadway was 12.5 m. Along the street, under the pavement, there were sewage channels for removing rainwater. Under the reign of Crusaders, shops were built along the street for merchants and artisans, and Cardo Street became a roofed shopping hall. There was a constant trade going on Cardo Street. There were shops, stalls and stores. Since 1099, Jerusalem was owned by European Crusaders. It was them who built most of the churches and temples in the old city and significantly rebuilt the constructions that already existed in the places associated with biblical events. Now, Amalric I reigned in Jerusalem. He was a distant relative of Euphrosyne, related through the wife of King Henry I of France, Anna, who was the daughter of Yaroslav the Wise. He recalled, it was difficult for Euphrosyne to pack up and go on a long journey to Jerusalem. It was perceived as disturbing by her relatives and Polotsk citizens. In 1166, the brothers Vasilek, Vyacheslav and David came to Polotsk monastery to say goodbye to Euphrosyne. Dear brother Vyacheslav comes with 2 daughters Kiriana and Olga, whom Vyacheslav introduced to his sister and asked for a blessing. Euphrosyne transferred the abbacy of the monasteries to her sister Eudoxia. After receiving the blessing of Bishop Dionysius, she went with her brother David and her cousin Eupraxia, first to Constantinople, then to the Holy Land. Lazarus accompanied her everywhere. The official reason of the trip was Euphrosyne's job as a diplomat for the church. The journey itself was overland, rather than the traditional route, from the Varangians to the Greeks. This gave us a bigger chance of obtaining the necessary information on the way. Lazarus felt that he was hungry when the food shop came in sight, and he decided to go eat. He ordered olive oil, seasoned with Jerusalem dry herbs and bread. It was time to start saving money. The princess will no longer be of help. He was left with his mission alone. Times in Jerusalem were not easy. Jerusalem's king Amalric hanged 12 Templar knights, who left the fortress of Transjordan without resistance, when it was besieged by the troops of Nureddin. Almeric, king of Jerusalem, assigned a squad of Templar knights to guard one of the well-fortified caves inside this fortress, located on the opposite bank of the Jordan. The squad surrendered. Almeric was enraged by this behavior, despite being on very good terms with the order and especially with Master Bertrand de Bloodfort. The fortress of Transjordan was part of the domain of a friend of the king, Philip of Naples, who joined the Templars in 1166. Several knights were able to successfully fight off the king's soldiers and escaped. The city was filled with spies of the king, looking for hidden knights. The reason for the king's anger was rumored to be related to the loss of some treasure that these Templars were guarding. The king was preparing for war with Egypt. Master Bertrand de Blapper refused to support the king. Lazarus had heard the legend of the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant, as well as the fact that for 9 years the Templars were looking for the Ark of the Covenant, or the Grail, or some other storehouse of wisdom, recorded in secret books. The legend also had something about the 12 caskets found in the dungeons of the Temple of Solomon. The Templars enlisted the best scientists of the time to investigate the contents of these 12 caskets. Among these caskets, scientists found one that they believed belonged to the biblical King Solomon. In this casket, the largest one, was the manuscript of the Keys of Solomon, according to legend, written by King Solomon for his son Rehoboam. The knowledge contained in this paper revealed the secrets of the universe, the laws of magic. It gave unlimited power over the living, birds, animals, world around a person. The Keys of Solomon consisted of a large and a small key. The large key was dedicated to preparing for magical operations, as well as making special devices for this activity. The small key, as known as the Lemegeton, consisted of 5 books. The first one contained all the information about the methods of subjection of the living, birds, animals, world around a person. The second contained information about angels and good spirits. The third and fourth books were devoted to astrology. Finally, the fifth book, called New Art, consisted of prayers. These books contained some of the knowledge that had been under the protection of the 9 unknowns since ancient times. In 273 BC, a society was established by the order of the ancient Indian king Ashoka. This society consisted of 9 of the greatest scientists from all over the world. At first, their main task was to systematize and account for all scientific knowledge kept in ancient sacred manuscripts, as well as knowledge acquired in the course of life. Later, the main responsibility of the 9 was to accumulate, systematize, and keep secret the knowledge that could cause global destruction and wars. The names of the 9 people were never released. The main task of the 9 was to make sure that valuable knowledge did not fall into the hands of greedy people, scoundrels and murderers. Greedy people should not be able to use the achievements of science and technology for evil, and to exercise control over this, an order consisting of 9 people was created. This order preferred to act incognito, so it was called the 9 Unknowns. All secret knowledge was concentrated in 9 special books, which were guarded day and night. Each of the 9 is the guardian of one book dedicated to a particular branch of knowledge. The first book is devoted to methods of conducting psychological warfare. That is the most dangerous of the books. It describes the methods of controlling the thoughts of the crowd, allowing you to control the whole world. The second book describes the ways of killing and reviving a person. It describes how to control the flow of nerve currents in the body, how to kill and revive a person with a single touch, and much more. The third book deals with microbiology. It is about the mutual coexistence of the macro and micro world. The fourth book contains all there is to metals and their transmutation and the laws of alchemy. The fifth book has the doctrine of terrestrial and extraterrestrial means of communication and interaction. The sixth book deals with the mysteries of gravity, as well as its use. The seventh book describes the laws of space and astronomy. The eighth book tells about the light and the structure of the world around us. The ninth book reveals the laws of evolution of human civilizations and the surrounding living and non-living world, as well as the origin and stages of their development. The chosen ones, the 9 unknowns, were periodically replaced. When one of the chosen ones died, another took their place. Only one thing remained unchanged: there were always 9 of them. Century after century, inheriting each other's place, the 9 protected progressive knowledge and technology from ignorant humanity. At the same time, the 9 unknowns kept this knowledge safe, waiting for people to be ready to interpret it correctly and use it only for good. For thousands of years, the secret knowledge was passed on by teachers to their students. It must be said that those through whose hands the secret knowledge was passed have never broken their vow of silence. They perfectly understood the full extent of responsibility for possessing the secrets of the universe, of the magical sciences, and especially for the leak of this information. The creation of data bank of sorts was the first vital necessity. Numerous wars and diseases, disasters, and natural disasters are a real threat to the life of both humanity as a whole and the lives of the guardians of this knowledge. Lazarus was eating, but his thoughts were still uneasy. He did not understand what was the root of this feeling in him. Where did this anxiety come from? For several days this anxiety had not left him. Lazarus raised his eyes and carefully examined the room in which he was eating. At first, nothing caught his attention, but suddenly he noticed a look that was thrown at him by a visitor sitting at a table in the right corner of the room. He was a small man in the garb of a Templar knight. Before him stood a jug of wine, and outwardly he gave the impression of a man who is resting and is already in a certain degree of intoxication. Nothing about this man was alarming, except for the eyes and the look that he occasionally gave Lazarus. Suddenly Lazarus realized that he had seen these eyes many times not long ago, and that he felt this look on him almost constantly. Lazarus tried to remember and analyze exactly how long this look had been haunting him, and realized one thing: this has been going on for a long time. Very long. Sometimes the craziest things are the right things to do. Taking that kind of action, a person does not always realize why they are doing it. But very often such an act saves a life. Intuition, and only intuition, is the basis of such actions. And perhaps intuition is one of the aliases of God. Lazarus got up, and not fully understanding what he is guided by, he went over and sat down at the table of the knight. The knight looked at Lazarus in silence, took his goblet, and without taking his eyes off Lazarus, sipped his wine. They stared at each other. It was as if they were studying each other. Finally the knight smiled, set down his goblet, and asked in flawless Russian, "How long ago have you noticed?" Lazarus understood that an honest and truthful answer was expected from him, so he said amiably, "I only noticed that you are following me now. Although I have seen you many times before, I did not think that you were following me. Do you want some wine?" The knight pointed to the second goblet that stood next to the pitcher. "I was waiting for you to come. This cup is for you. Try this wine, you'll like it." The knight continued, "We have been following you since you made the cross for Princess Euphrosyne. We have a lot of questions for you. So drink the wine, we'll have a long conversation. I understand you have questions for me. So let's do it this way: I will answer all your questions, but only within my authority. I think you understand that I am doing an errand for my mentor, who is hoping for your understanding. If you answer all my questions honestly and correctly, you will receive 2 gifts. The first, and I hope the most valuable for you, is your life. The second gift is a parchment, a work on the properties of food, created by Simeon Seth. You asked everywhere about the casket with this book. Naturally, the casket itself will remain with its former owner. Ask your questions, and always remember what I told you. Today I must bring your answers to the mentor." The knight said, not taking his eyes off Lazarus's face. Lazarus wondered, "For some reason, I'm not scared. The knight is trustworthy. There is no Euphrosyne. I am unlikely to find the casket myself. Yes, and there is no other way out than to trust the knight." These thoughts flashed through his mind. He decided to tell everything except that he had a stone, jasper, the key to the letter. "I only have one question. I want to know who you are and who your mentor is." Lazarus said, "I am, as you can see by my clothes, a Templar knight. My mentor is one of the chosen ones. It's a great honor for you that he paid attention to you. That's all I can tell you in response to your question." While saying this, the knight continued to keep his eyes on Lazarus's face. It was as if he was trying to read his mind. Lazarus felt his gaze deep in his head. He felt that he could not resist that look. Resistance was useless, he was at complete mercy of that look. "I will answer all your questions," Lazarus said. This is the right decision. My first question concerns the cross you made. Why did you make a cross out of cypress wood and cover it with gold plates? The knight asked. 6 days before I was summoned by the princess and was instructed to make this cross, my father came to me in a dream and said, Euphrosyne will order you to make a cross. You must take the cypress tree and make a cross from it, according to the drawing that the princess will give you. You will cover the cross with gold plates. That is how the Ark of the Covenant was made. All plates must be connected with each other by enamel, in the technique of cloisonné enamel. This is a special technique that turns the gold coating into a single unit. Unlike the Ark of the Covenant, which struck the uninitiated with lightning, 3, you use silver plates on the sides. This is necessary for the future purpose of this cross. You will make a cross with a height of 52 centimeters, which corresponds to the gematria. This corresponds to the number 52. The first 2 letters, nun, and vet, are the root consonants of the word NIV, Navi, which is included in the combination NIV Svatame. Literally it means, harvest mouth, that is, what mouth utters. Thus the word Navi, prophet, indicates the essence of prophecy, which is to tell the people the commandments of God and thereby to lead people to the true path. Predictions of the future are only one side of the prophecy, and not the most important one. You will make the upper middle crossing 14 centimeters, which corresponds to the gematria. This corresponds to the number 14. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The numeric value of the letter is 1. The 10 commandments of the divine revelation to the Jews on Mount Sinai begin with the letter Aleph, Anoki, I, your God who brought you out of Egypt. Daled is the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The numeric value of the letter is 4. The number 4 corresponds to the basic elements of our world: fire, air, water, and earth. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah are our foremothers. The name of God consists of 4 letters. You will make the lower middle crossing 21 centimeters, which corresponds to the gematria. This corresponds to the number 21. Vet, the 2nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The numerical value of the letter is 2. It symbolizes our world, which is the place of the God. We have already spoken about the meaning of the letter Aleph, the 1st letter of the Hebrew alphabet. This is what my father told me, and this is what guided me in making the cross. Lazarus finished his answer. Okay, now answer my second question. How did you know about the casket and what it contains? Asked the knight. Lazarus felt that something inside him was forcing him to tell the truth without hiding anything. My father came to me in a dream and said that the jasper stone stored in our family is a key stone. The key to a priceless treasure. They are not gems, nor are they gold or silver. This is a half of a parchment sheet enclosed in an old book, which is placed in a simple silver casket. The prohibition to open this casket to the uninitiated is written in Hebrew on this casket. My father did not say what was written on this sheet of parchment. The dream was interrupted. The only thing that my father managed to say was that the book in which this parchment is enclosed is the paper, on the properties of food, created by Simeon Seth. I read this paper in the library of the Princess Euphrosyne. Before her death, Princess Euphrosyne saw an angel in a dream who instructed her to tell me that this parchment belonged to King Solomon, on which Solomon wrote where the countless treasures were, and also drew a map of how to find them. Lazarus finished his story, and suddenly felt a great inner relief, as if he had got rid of a heavy burden. He looked at the knight, but there was no one at the table. He was the only one sitting at the table, and the only thing that reminded him of the knight was a jug of wine and 2 goblets on the table. Lazarus felt that he was very tired and needed to rest. He got up and went to the guest courtyard of the monastery where he was staying. You did the right thing. These words in the form of thoughts constantly occurred to Lazarus when he awoke. He remembered his encounter with the Templar perfectly, and he also remembered his depressed state when he went to bed. He was literally falling off his feet with fatigue. He was also depressed by the thought that he had betrayed the family heirloom when he told the knight about it. But this morning, when he awoke, his mood was fine, and even cheerful. He did not remember falling asleep, but when he woke up, he felt great, and in his head was only one thought: you did the right thing. At the head of the bed on which he slept there was a book, On the Properties of Food, written by Simeon Seth. A corner of parchment was protruding from the book. Thrilled, Lazarus picked up the book and took out the parchment. It was an invitation letter with an address and time on it. The host was not specified. From the invitation, written in a very respectful form, it was clear that he was obliged to come. He found an inconspicuous door next to a spice shop on Decumanus Street. At his knock, the door was opened by a woman whose face was hidden under a burqa. She stared at him without speaking. Finally, Lazarus remembered and handed her the invitation letter. After glancing at the letter, the woman took it and made a silent gesture to follow her. Following the woman, Lazarus walked down a long corridor separated by several doors, where armed guards were stationed. As they approached, the guards opened the doors for them and closed them behind them. There were no windows in the corridor, and it was lit by torches mounted on the walls. It seemed to Lazarus that this endless corridor sloped downward. At last they stopped before a door guarded by 2 Templar knights. The woman handed them an invitation letter. After carefully reading the letter, the knights opened the door for them, and left the letter with them. Silently, the woman turned around and walked back. Lazarus moved forward and the doors closed quietly behind him. The room where he entered was a large hall in which there were about 20 of the Templar knights. As it seemed to Lazarus, no one paid any attention to the newcomer. Some of the knights were sitting at the table and playing dice. Others were engaged in swordplay. The hall was very bright with hot torches and candles, but there were no windows or doors except the one through which Lazarus had entered. All the knights were armed. Lazarus stood and did not understand what would happen next. The door is closed behind him, and no one pays attention to him. Then he saw a knight coming toward him from the center of the hall. As the knight approached, Lazarus recognized him as his recent companion. It was comforting Lazarus. The knight approached, smiled amiably and asked, "Did you get the gift, the book you were looking for?" "Yes, thank you," Lazarus replied. "This book confirmed that everything you said was true. No one knew that when we found this casket, we put the parchment found in the casket in this particular book. You do have the gift of prophecy. That is why you are honored. You will be accepted by the Chosen One. None of us here have ever seen the Chosen One. We are proud to have been chosen to protect him, as well as the fact that we sometimes carry out his orders. All the people here have been carefully selected and have various unique abilities. I have been instructed to tell you briefly about us. The Templars are a knightly fraternity that arose after the First Crusade. After the conquest of the Holy Land, many pilgrims rushed to the holy places. Their protection from the Saracens was taken over by us, the Templar Knights. Temple, in French, means temple. The Templars set out to restore the Temple of Solomon as a temple of renewed wisdom, new grace, and a new man. Actually, that's why we are called the Order of Templars. Those who joined the Templars took 3 vows: poverty, celibacy, and obedience. Also, upon joining, all property is transferred to the order. Young brothers fight in the Holy Land, and those who are old live out their days in the estate in Europe. In addition to protection, we maintain fortresses to protect the roads. The youth of the French aristocracy has come to us. Those who came to us gave up their rich life, pleasures, and entertainment. They chose the ascetic and dangerous life of a monk warrior. Our success is characterized not only by the ability to obey, follow orders and solve problems, but also enthusiasm and valor. The foundation of our success is faith in science and knowledge. By believing in God, we recognize the chosen people of the Jewish people. With us, the scientific elite of the Jewish people, the knowledge that they possess is the secret to our success in military affairs. Ignorant people often accuse us of dealing with the devil. Bands of our warriors cross the desert, and no one dies of dysentery or typhus. We serve prayers, dip the cross in water, but this is not the success. We just know that you need to boil water, and all the demons that are in it will disappear. We use alcohol when nursing the wounded, and we use it not inside, but for the treatment of wounds and tools. Alcohol made the survival rate of our soldiers many times higher than other knights. The secret of our wealth, it's a check, with it we make the money invisible, virtual. Anyone can put gold or silver in the Templar Bank in Europe and get a document, by presenting which they would receive the same amount wherever there is a Templar Bank. In a short period of time, we have changed the appearance of European cities beyond recognition, and the results of our knowledge and the laws of sacred geometry, mystery and sacred geography have become visible. Having mastered them, our architects imprinted the sacred science in unattainable works of perfection. The whole world is amazed by the splendor of Gothic cathedrals, pointed arches in the sky. Nothing like this was previously known. The brightness of their stained glass windows exceeds all other ornamental compositions of colored glass in this respect. Their advantage is their remarkable ability to amplify the light passing through them. Even when it's cloudy, even at dusk, this glass continues to sparkle. The room where you are now is a huge underground structure, the so-called stables of King Solomon. They could accommodate up to 2,000 horses. Here, in addition to material treasures, the founders of our order managed to find many handwritten books that not only set forth ancient knowledge, Kabbalistic and other esoteric teachings, but also interpreted the gospel events differently. Therefore, some of our secret knowledge is dangerous for the modern church. All this gives us huge wealth and a sovereign position. We are a kind of empire that cannot level with the borders of the land. People are not born with equal abilities, so in every nation there are the chosen ones. It is not people who elect the chosen, but God. God gives the chosen special abilities and a special destiny. Yes, the main line of fate is predetermined for both the chosen and the unselected. A person can make changes in their destiny and their purpose. They cannot change the main line of fate, they can only direct this line either towards good or towards evil. If by the line of fate, a man is destined to shed blood, then he will shed blood. But only he can make a choice between being a doctor or a killer. Both shed blood, but the doctor does surgery for good, and the killer kills people for evil. Today is the day when you will have to make a choice. You have the great honor of being accepted by the chosen. No one has ever seen the chosen ones, but not only our Grand Master listens to their recommendations and advice. Our order and the Crusades also took place on their recommendation. I told you a lot, but I got permission to do so. I think you're ready for the meeting now. The knight made an inviting gesture to follow him with his hand. At this moment, all the knights in the hall reacted as if on cue to this gesture. They were lined up in 2 rows, forming a long corridor across the room. This corridor extended to a wall lined with Jerusalem stone. As the knight and Lazarus, who had followed him, approached this wall, a secret door opened without a sound. The knight motioned for Lazarus to come inside. Lazarus, aware of the importance of what was happening, stepped over the threshold with trepidation. At that moment, the secret door behind him closed soundlessly and Lazarus stepped into the vast hall. The hall was striking not only for its size, but also for the absence of anything other than a simple wooden chair standing in the middle of the hall. Lazarus and his traveling companion sat in a small tavern and dined on seafood. It was the last night before they sailed. It was a warm evening, and they sat at a table on the roof terrace of the tavern. Above them, there was only the starry sky. You can see the towers of San Nicolas and La Chêne, which were the entrance gates to the port of La Rochelle, as well as the Tower of La Lanterne, built by the Templars in the form of a Gothic church. This tower was used as a beacon, which tomorrow would be the last thing they would see on land. This part of the coast was made by nature itself to become an ideal port. Indeed, here in the Bay of Storms, as the sailors called the Bay of Biscay, you can hardly find a place more protected from the weather. Nature itself has created excellent conditions for the port. It is reliably protected from storms by a barrier in the form of the islands of Ré, Oran and Aix, within a warm climate zone all year round thanks to the Gulf Stream. The Bay of Biscay is shaped like a growing moon, which is why it is called the Great Sea of the Moon. The deep-water port of La Rochelle is accessible to ocean-going vessels. In addition, La Rochelle is the only port on the Atlantic coast free of tidal restrictions, with a large depth at low tide. The Gateway of the Ocean is the second name of the city. It has a long history of the Free City, built in 1023. Then it was called the city of Rocher, which means rock in French. Originally, it was a tiny fishing port in the depths of a swampy bay. In 961, Duke Guillaume of Aquitaine granted the village the right to provide port services to passing ships. The convenient bay, protected from storms by islands, was ideal for building a port. From Guillaume, the city received its first privileges, the trade in wine and salt with the northern countries, the import of grain and fabrics from Spain flourished. The Latin word rocca later transformed into the French roche. The original meaning is a rock, then a castle on a rock, and then just a castle. Subsequently, the Duke of Aquitaine granted La Rochelle the status of a free port city, which allowed La Rochelle to become one of the largest port cities on the Atlantic Ocean and flourish. The main commodities were salt and wine of this region. La Rochelle, like all other Aquitaine territories, was under the English crown. The city was rapidly growing rich in trade with England and Northern Europe. As France would not accept the loss of a large part of its possessions, war was brewing, and fortifications were being built around La Rochelle to protect it from the French troops. La Rochelle was not willing to part with the profits of the sea trade. The wine and the hearty food made Lazarus and his companion feel sleepy. They decided to go to sleep for the few hours that remained before they sailed. They went down the wooden stairs, holding on to the railing, to the third floor of the tavern, where there were guest rooms. The door to their rooms was directly opposite the stairs. They lay down without undressing, and sleep came to them as soon as their heads touched the pillows. All these stories only came about because there was no king in Israel. These words from the Talmud were dreamed by Lazarus. In his dream, the captain of the ship said these words and continued, "We are forced to sail to the unknown. You all know the reason for this. I believe that the punishment we receive does not correspond to our guilt. But everything is in the hands of God. We shall trust Him. I will try to explain why I believe that the punishment we receive does not correspond to our act. We refuse to hand over our brothers for execution. Yes, they committed a crime, but it was up to us and no one else to decide their fate." So, returning to this sad event, we see that a man from the tribe of Levi took a concubine. This Levite had a rather unpleasant character. He was a great pedant. Once he found a fly in the plate, and once he found a hair, and made a row about it. "I found a fly and forgave it, but I found a hair and didn't forgive it," he said. Anyway, this Levite found some serious problems with the work of his concubine and was obviously very angry with her, and she left him. She went to her father's house, in Beit Lechem Yehuda, and stayed there for 1 year and 4 months. He felt that he was guilty, so he went to ask her to come back to him. In any case, he felt that the fault laid with him for being too particular and too harsh. He was attached to her, and went to ask her to return. The Levite was a man of very high position. The father-in-law was also a rather high-ranking person. The father-in-law receives him with such cordiality that he keeps him on the 4th day, and asks him to stay on the 5th day, because it is already past noon, and they will not get home before dark, so it is better to spend the night at the father-in-law's house. Levite understands that it turns out a kind of closed-circle model. Getting up in the morning, you need to eat, and if you eat heartily, and after that, wait until tomorrow. So the Levite, his concubine and servant decided to leave and return home. Before it got dark, they managed to walk to Givat Benjamin, that is located between Shofat and Neve Yaakov. It's not very close to Jerusalem. The Levite believed that if they came to a Jewish city, they would not be left without support. They come and sit in the central square, at the gate of the city, which was the custom. When a stranger who wants to spend the night sits there, someone always agrees to take him to spend the night. However, no one offers them lodging for the night. The inhabitants of this city do not invite them to spend the night because they were stingy, and they did not want to invite travelers and feed them, especially since this place is on the road of pilgrims who go to Shiloh 3 times a year, and you cannot feed them all. Of course, stinginess is not a very good thing, but sometimes a person is stingy, and there is nothing so terrible about it. An old man who was walking tired from work, asks them, "Why are you sitting here, where are you from?" And this person just invites them to his place. He says, "I'm inviting you, let's go to my place and get it over with, because complaints don't do anything." In the evening, a group of drunken people came to the house where they were staying and demanded to give them a concubine in payment for staying in this city. This group consisted of poor and socially degraded people. The Levite had no chance, even by giving his life, to save the concubine from being raped. There is no reason to condemn him. The Levite gave the concubine, calmly, without any emotions, and even went to bed. When the next morning, the exhausted concubine on willpower alone reached this house, she couldn't even knock, and remained on the threshold. She was on the threshold, when Levite opened the door. All this happens in the mountains of Benjamin in the winter month of Shvat, when the temperature there at night is about 0 degrees. She might, therefore, have simply died by dawn of cold and exhaustion, after being raped and abused by all that mad pack of savages. In the morning, the Levite opens the door and realizes that she is dead, so he loads her on a donkey and brings her home, and does this very unusual thing. He takes a knife and dissects her, partly, so that no bones are damaged. He does this as an act of asking for forgiveness for what he did to her. This is a sequence of completely level-headed actions of a person who understands that he must avenge her, and must not allow anything like this to ever happen. This is not the act of a wild animal, but the act of a leader whose cold mind turns into hot and very impressive actions. He seems to be acting outside of normal human actions, however, he acts very effectively. If he had written a proclamation, it would have had very little effect. With such a proclamation, when each tribe of Israel receives a piece of the killed person, it certainly makes an impression. Any person requires respect not only in life, but also after death. Respect for the dead consists of giving a body to the earth as quickly as possible, in purity and respect. And this Levite cuts the body and sends it to different parts of the earth. He does this in order to prevent anything like this from happening in the future, and thus he believes that he is doing this in order to increase respect for this deceased person. He wants his actions to bring those responsible for her death to justice. He sends it to 12 tribes. The tribe of Benjamin is not included in this number 12. This number includes the tribes of Ephraim and Menashe. The tribes of Ephraim and Menashe are considered to be one of the tribes of Joseph. Everyone who saw this message said, "There has not been anything like this since the day when the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt." That is, from the moment of the birth of people of Israel, to this day. Therefore, all the tribes decided to gather and consult what they should do. To take revenge on the tribe of Benjamin, the Israelites marched from Beersheba to Dan Laish. The Israelites camped at Mizpah in Gilead. The army and generals were gathered there. In total, the Israelis gathered 400,000 armed soldiers. The Israelites sent a demand to the tribe of Benjamin to hand over the rapists of the concubine of the Levite, but they refused to comply with this demand. The tribe of Benjamin gathered 26,000 soldiers for the war, and they had an elite group of 700 soldiers. The tribe of Benjamin were excellent warriors, well-aimed archers and slingers, so despite the numerical superiority over the enemy, it was not easy to defeat them. On the first day of the battle, the soldiers of the tribe of Benjamin defeated the Israelites, killing 22,000 enemy soldiers. A day later, a second battle took place at Giva, in which again the Benjamin tribe was victorious. The Israelites lost 18,000 soldiers that day. Soon there was a third battle. This time the Israelites set an ambush in Baal-Tamar, where 10,000 soldiers were holed up. First, the Israelites approached Giva, and after losing 30 people, they began an imaginary retreat. The soldiers of the tribe of Benjamin gave chase, but they were attacked by the Israelites, who were sitting in ambush. In this battle, the warriors of the tribe of Benjamin lost, losing 25,100 men. The captain looked at the warriors sitting in front of him and continued, "We were forced to flee our country. And now we have to carry the light of the Torah in the new place that the Lord has chosen for us. Never forget that you are warriors of the tribe of Benjamin. Soon we will see land, and the end of our long voyage will come. You see these birds in the sky? They are like Noah's doves, they tell us about the proximity of land." Lazarus was awake. Events that took place in the year 2561 from the creation of the world, passed before him in a dream in one night. It was already dawn, and it was time to go to the ship. Lazarus understood why he was dreaming of these events, and he also felt the weight of responsibility for his mission. The mission entrusted to him by the Chosen One. "Sit down," a quiet voice sounded not only from all sides, but seemed to sound inside of him. Repeated quiet echoes made it impossible to determine where the voice was coming from. Lazarus obediently complied with the request and sat down on a chair in the middle of the hall. For the first time, he noticed that on the arm of the chair there was a beautiful silver cup filled with clear water. Lazarus closed his eyes to feel the silence that surrounded him. The only pounding he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. Again he heard the voice, "We have been looking for you for a long time, or rather not for you, but for the key stone. We knew that this stone was kept by one of the descendants of the tribe of Benjamin. This stone has made a long journey. Together with the warriors of the tribe of Benjamin, who lost the battle near Givet, he sailed to an unknown land. Several descendants of these soldiers, after many years, returned to Jerusalem. Their task was to establish communication and contact with the remaining members of the tribe of Benjamin. Times have changed. In search of relatives, they settled in Caesarea, the city of Itl. They could only confide their secret to their countrymen of the tribe of Benjamin. The story of when countrymen from other tribes of Israel attacked the tribe of Benjamin was passed down from generation to generation. We do not know about the fate of these people. We know that before these messengers, there were other messengers from the settlement that the warriors of the tribe of Benjamin organized in an unknown land. These messengers came to King Solomon, and the king had secret contacts with this settlement. Solomon surrounded his reign with luxury and wealth, and made the king's silver in Jerusalem equal to the common stones. The origin of King Solomon's wealth was not known to anyone. The king did not trust anyone with this secret, and when he died he took it with him. Every 3 years he sent ships to the land of Ophir and brought back silver. Scientists have tried to find out what Solomon carried to Ophir in exchange for these riches and where this country is located. The location of the mysterious country has not been found out yet. After the death of King Solomon, his kingdom split into 2 states, Israel and Judah. The Templars found 12 caskets in the dungeons of the Temple of Solomon. The Templars got the smartest men of the time to take on this mystery, which was a long and diligent research of the contents of these 12 caskets. Among these caskets, scientists found a casket with an inscription forbidding the opening of the casket to the uninitiated. But curiosity overcame caution, and one of the scientists opened it. In there was a piece of parchment with a map drawn on it and some text on the back of the map. I haven't been able to read the text yet. One of our chosen ones had a prophetic vision that only an initiate can read the text using a special stone. This stone should be placed on the text and the words around the stone should be read. The scientist who opened the casket fell ill with a terrible disease. Pieces of his body began to fall off. First the fingers, then the nose and lips, then the ears. He left to the desert. You are now initiated into the secret, and you are the owner of this stone. That's enough for today, you can go rest. Knight Bernard will now be your companion and assistant. You can trust him completely. All the lights in the room suddenly went out, leaving only the narrow path from the chair where Lazarus sat to the open doorway opposite of him. In this opening stood a man in the clothes of a well-to-do citizen. When Lazarus approached him, he recognized him as a familiar knight who had accompanied him to this meeting. Bernard extended a friendly hand and congratulated him. "I am very happy. I want to offer you my friendship and, if you need, my help and protection. Now you are one of us, and we will do a great thing together." Henry II arrested the main representatives of the Jews in England and sent them to Normandy, where they lived until their tribesmen paid them £5,000 of ransom. In England, the Jews and their property are the property of the king. Even the edition of the Laws of Edward the Confessor included an article, "Let it be known that all Jews should be in the whole state under the protection of the king. None of them can pass to any rich lord without the king's permission, for the Jews and all their possessions belong to the king, so if someone took them or their money, the king, if he could and would demand their return as his property." Henry II granted the Jews, Carta Judaeorum Anglii et Normandiae, which served as the basis of their privileged position. In this charter, the Jews of England and Normandy are allowed to live in these countries freely and honestly, honorifice. In disputes between Christians and Jews, the testimony of 2 witnesses, one Christian and one Jew, is required, and the oral testimony of a Jew can be replaced by a written document, brief. If a Christian complains against a Jew, the latter must be tried by his co-religionists, per pares Judaei. Jews can freely buy anything except for the church vessels and the blood-stained cloth. If the Christian prosecutor does not have any witnesses, his oath on the Bible is sufficient to justify the Jew, and in cases with the crown, on the Torah scroll, super Rochulum. In judicial proceedings of disputes between Christians and Jews over debt obligations, the figure of capital employed is established by the testimony of a Jew, and the figure of interest money is established by the testimony of a Christian. Jews could apply directly to the king, to the royal curia, and to the commandants of the royal castles in which they lived. The more interest the Jews received, the higher was the king's income. For the crusade against Saladin, Henry demanded 1/10 of the property of his subjects, and 1/4 of the property of the Jews for this purpose. 1/10 of the property gave £70,000, and 1/4 collected from the Jews gave £600,000. The king received 2 byzants from each pound, i.e. 10% of all sums returned to the Jews through the royal courts. The supervision of Jewish money transactions was entrusted to 2 judges, justices of the Jews, who, from time to time, toured England and made sure that the Jews did not commit secret transactions and did not deprive the king of his income. The amount of interest that Jews were allowed to charge, and which they usually received, was set at 2 pence a week for each pound of debt, which is about 43.3% per annum. The Jews dealt directly with the king and his courts, but this did not mean that the king was sovereign in the sense of their taxation or the demand for irrevocable loans, in the oft-repeated expression of official documents of the royal treasury. All taxes levied on other subjects of the king, aids, reliefs, fines, and amercements, were also imposed on the Jews, with the only difference that the latter had to pay them in a larger amount. The Jews were the king's men, however, no more than the barons. Jews enjoyed a special privilege of the nobility, freedom of movement and the right to settle anywhere. In order to force Jews to pay him money, the king forbade Jews to carry weapons, so that they would remain completely dependent on the king. Levies on Jews accounted for approximately 1/13 of the total revenue of the treasury, and there were only 16,000 Jews living in England. Despite all the privileges, 13 Jewish families decided to leave England. The Templar order undertook to smuggle them out. The Templars demanded a huge sum of money for their services. Among these Jews were merchants who sailed with the Normans to the shores of the mysterious land. It was a big secret. There they communicated with the Guarani tribes, who told them about the mysterious newcomers many years ago. From the stories of these newcomers and their customs, the merchants learned that they were their people, who founded this settlement and were the progenitors of this tribe. When the Guarani learned that the merchants who sailed to them were tribesmen of their tribe, they told them a legend that has been passed down from generation to generation. One day several ships came to their shore. There were only male warriors on the ships. They called themselves the Sons of Israel. The Sons of Israel said that they came from the Promised Land. They called the surrounding native tribes the peoples of Canaan. They talked about God and the history of the chosen people. The Sons of Israel took wives from various native tribes, and later united these tribes. They built a city, Vignemark, the eternal city. They taught the inhabitants to mine gold and silver. In gold and silver, they paid tribute to their king, who remained in the Promised Land. For this treasure, the king sent his ships every year. Then, for some unknown reason, communication from the Promised Land ceased for many centuries. Flood and famine destroyed the city of Vignemark, and time has kept only the legend of these newcomers, and the stone key. This key should open the way to the prepared consignment of treasures that were not sent to the king of the Promised Land by the Sons of Israel. The Vikings tried to find these treasures, but they failed. The key stone was taken to the Promised Land along with the map drawn by the Sons of Israel. The Templars helped Jewish families leave England, and in return, the Jews revealed the secret of their hidden treasures and helped them find you. Your family descended from the Sons of Israel who were sent to the king in the Promised Land, and they had the key stone. Bernard finished his story. He took Lazarus by the hand, and together they stepped into a dark corridor, barely lit by a torch hanging on the wall. The new friend took the torch with his free hand and led Lazarus confidently down the corridor. The torch illuminated a space of several cubits. Its light was lost in the dark depths of the corridor. Bernard walked steadily forward. The corridor seemed endless, a feeling reinforced by the surrounding darkness. The corridor was not straight, and there were various branches along the way, but Bernard had a good sense of direction. Suddenly there was a blank wall in front of them. Bernard extinguished the torch and hung it on the wall. He tapped the wall in a certain spot, and a dim light hit them in the eyes. Lazarus couldn't hide his surprise. They found themselves in the living rooms of the house where he was staying. The stone wall closed noiselessly behind them, and he was surprised to find that they were under the stairs to the second floor, where Lazarus's room was. When they entered the room, Bernard sat down with apparent pleasure on the second bed, which was in Lazarus' room. In this room he had lived since the end of April, when he and the princess arrived in Jerusalem. It was now the end of May. There were always 2 beds in his room, and he knew that he had a roommate, but he had never seen this roommate. Now he understood who his roommate was. They sat in silence on their beds, and looked at each other. Bernard broke the long silence. Do you want to rest, maybe eat, or do you want to get to our business? Bernard took a folded sheet of parchment from his pocket and handed it to Lazarus. This is an exact copy of the original. I think you'll be interested in getting started, he said. Lazarus unfolded the sheet and studied the map carefully. The image represented the line of the route, consisting of 2 parts. First, the route goes by water, and then by land. There was an image of a ship on the sea line of the route. On the land line, there was an image of a person. Along these lines, various landmarks were depicted in the form of pictures. The back of the sheet was divided into 6 squares. Each square was filled with Hebrew text. Lazarus could not read the text. The text seemed to be just a random set of letters. Lazarus took out a stone hidden under his clothing and placed it on the upper right square. The attempt to read the text around the stone led to nothing. Just a set of different letters. Until the evening, Lazarus and Bernard moved the stone through various quadrants and texts. There was no result. Only Lazarus could read the Hebrew text. Night came and they were so tired that they decided to go to bed. Perhaps after the rest they will come up with some new ideas. Lazarus had been dreaming about the Hebrew text all night. There was something about the text that caught his attention, but he couldn't figure out what it was. So he woke up, not understanding what was wrong in the text. All the next day, he carefully studied the texts on the back of the sheet. By evening, the letters were blurred into dark spots before his eyes. They decided to go eat and go to bed. Further search today would be fruitless. At night, in a dream, texts flashed before Lazarus's eyes, a dance of letters flashed by, everything spun and moved. Again it seemed to Lazarus that something was wrong in this endless round of texts and letters. The excitement was so great that he woke up in the middle of the night. Suddenly he realized what had caused his agitation. The letter YD is spelled incorrectly. The letter YD in the text is written in reverse. The letter YD is not written from right to left, but from left to right. He lit a candle and studied the texts. Indeed, each text contains the misspelled letter YD. Lazarus again began to apply the stone to the text. There was no result. He put out the candle, went back to bed and fell asleep like a serene child. In the morning, Bernard woke him up. When Lazarus awoke, he felt refreshed. Bernard was already sitting at the table, examining the stone. Lazarus shared his discovery with him, showing him the misspelled letters, YD. If texts are a lock, then a stone is a key. The key can only be inserted in the lock in a certain position. We must find the correct position of the stone on the text. If the misspelled letters, YD, are marks on the texts, then the stone must have a mark that must be combined with the marks on the texts. Lazarus said. Bernard nodded and showed Lazarus an artificial stripe on the side of the stone. Lazarus took the stone and placed it on the upper left square with the text. He carefully combined the misspelled letter, YD, in this text with the mark on the stone. Around the outer surface of the stone, from right to left, the letters formed the words, "We went out, and taking a course for the setting sun, went on the waves of the ocean. After a long voyage, we discovered a huge island. There was plenty of plant and animal food, large rivers flowed, and the land beckoned. There are lovely wooden huts, with gardens that contain fruit trees of all sorts. The hilly area is covered with dense forests. Residents spend a lot of time hunting. They also have fish, for the shores of their homeland are washed by the ocean. There is a powerful river in the ocean that flows in only one direction. When you swim into the setting sun, you must swim next to a powerful river. When you swim back you must swim in the waters of this river. Long before the approach to this land, the water in the ocean will become muddy and dirty, but it will be fresh." Bernard carefully recorded everything that Lazarus have read. Lazarus took the stone and placed it on the upper right square with the text. He carefully combined the misspelled letter, YD, in this text with the mark on the stone. Around the outer surface of the stone from right to left the letters formed into words. "Treasures on Lake Titicaca in the underground city of Mount Timoko," read Lazarus. Bernard carefully wrote down everything that was read aloud. Lazarus moved the stone and placed it on the second right square with the text. He carefully combined the misspelled letter, YD, in this text with the mark on the stone. Around the outer surface of the stone, from right to left, it became possible to read the words, "Silver is located in Upiayasu, Big Lagoon. It is necessary to swim only in winter, the Parnaby River, the Payoi River, the Rayala River. In the settlement of the Guarani tribe, show the keystone to the chief." Bernard wrote down everything that was read aloud. The texts of the other squares were damaged by time and could not be read. Time is relentless, we all age, but we don't notice it. The body loses its strength, and we become lazy. But reason and memory make us indefatigable, strong, and young again and again. They take us back to the past, which passes before our eyes in pictures. Lazarus looked at the pile of parchment on which he had written down his memories, and asked his daughter to read the last notes aloud. "We were sitting on the shore of Lake Titicaca and warming ourselves by the fire. The chief of the Guarani tribe moved the knots on a bundle of ropes and told about the distant past of these places. These were all the most important events reflected in the legends and songs passed down from generation to generation. The chosen sons came in great ships. They were men and they had weapons in their hands. But they never used these weapons. Subsequently, the chosen sons were joined by all the surrounding tribes, and there was no aggression and military actions on the part of the chosen sons, uniting other tribes around them. They created and built the city of Vinimark. The city they called Vinimark, in honor of their chosen ancestor Benjamin. They called themselves the chosen people, because their people were chosen by God. The God chose them and gave them a mission to bring the light of knowledge to other people. The city became the cultural, economic, and religious center of a huge state that existed for many centuries. A prolonged drought that led to crop failures and, as a result, famine, caused the fall of a powerful civilization. People left the city. Then there was another disaster, an earthquake and a flood. The stream of water scattered the stone slabs that were used for building houses. People left the city and took refuge in small mountain villages. The first rulers of the Inca who founded Cuzco came from the sacred Vinimark and were declared gods. These gods founded the capital of the Incas and in a few years created a new powerful empire. Some residents of Vinimark took refuge in vast underground labyrinths of the underground city in Mount Timaco. Tomorrow we will meet with their leader, and you will show him the stone you have, and I think he will tell you why they stayed and what they are guarding. He will be glad to meet one of the chosen sons. In the light of the fire, Lazarus remembered what he saw during the day, and it remains a mystery to him how the ancient people managed to build massive stone structures on a high plateau, because the weight of some blocks reaches 200 tons. The firelight illuminated Varuvaru. On the lands, exposed by retreating waters of the lake, there are distinctive alternating stripes of part of a complex system of ancient agronomy Varuvaru, which the people Vinimark was taught by the gods, according to legend. In the distance, the city's harbor could be seen, with piers and levees along the lake's former shoreline. They were built from huge stone blocks weighing 100 to 440 tons. Today, the port facilities are located far from the lake shore. A deadly avalanche of water rolled over the island where the port used to be, washing away houses along with people. In one terrible day, the volume of the lake was reduced by almost 4 times, and the city was lost in a terrible disaster. The chief continued his story. He thought a little and continued, the Incas call this city Tepecala, the stone core of the world, on the sacred island of Titicaca. According to legend, it was there that the god Inti lowered the first Incas to the earth, Manco Capac, the founder of the Inca state, and Mama Oclo, the sister and wife of Manco Capac. The Incas built the Temple of the Sun, completely covered with gold plates. Dawn came suddenly. The chief of the underground city on Mount Timoco met them with llama-drawn carts as they approached the entrance to the city. When they entered the city gates, they saw that the complex consisted of a system of mines with a diameter of 30 meters and a total length, according to the chief, about 500 kilometers. In the mines there were the lodgings of the inhabitants, who stood near them and silently greeted the guests with a raised hand. No noise, only the soft creaking of the carts and a light breeze that suggested a good ventilation system, emphasized the solemnity of the event. The surrounding walls were covered with drawings depicting the normal life of the city. The drawings were so good and real that it seemed that the carts were going through the evening market, or along the evening streets past the open window niches in which the ordinary life of the townspeople was visible. The carts suddenly turned into one of the alleyways they had encountered on their way. Here the noise created by the carts was joined by the noise of a powerful stream of water. The noise grew steadily louder and reached its maximum when they entered a narrow stone bridge standing over the mouth of a wide underground river. Just beyond the bridge, the passage was littered with huge rocks. The carts stopped. There were drawings on the walls between the bridge and the rubble, dingy with dust and time. But they were completely different from the drawings they had seen before. In all the drawings there was an image of a bow and arrow and the astrological sign of Pisces. Even the sails of the painted ships had this image on them. In the middle there was an image of a celestial circle encircled by 12 constellations, representing groups of stars forming various 12 figures. In the sky circle there was a square divided by lines into 12 separate squares. In the center of each square there were shallow indentations of various shapes. Lazarus knew at once what he was seeing. These were the signs and symbols of the tribe of Benjamin. The square depicted in the center was very similar to the image of the front part of the high priest's breastplate. Lazarus looked at the leader of the underground city and saw that he was praying and looking at this square. Suddenly the chief turned and silently gestured Lazarus at the painted square. It was as if he expected Lazarus to do something. At first Lazarus didn't understand the gesture, but then he had an epiphany and knew what was expected of him. He remembered the words of the Torah, 5, and fill it with the filling of the stone, 4 rows of stones, the first row of Odom, Pitido, and Vorax. Second row, Nophe, Sapir and Yalam. Third row, Lash, Shvo and Aklomo. Fourth row, Tarshish, Shoam, and Isp. And the stones will be according to the names of the sons of Israel, 12 according to their names. Lazarus took the keystone from his bosom and placed it in the 12th recess in the square. The stone entered quite tightly, the contours of the stone corresponded to the contours of the recess in the square. The chief bowed respectfully to Lazarus and took a pouch from his pocket, opened it, and took out 11 different stones. The chief handed these stones to Lazarus and assumed an attitude of respectful expectation. Looking at the stones, Lazarus, as a goldsmith, realized that they were various gems. He also understood what he had to do next. Lazarus began to insert the stones one by one into the corresponding holes. Ruby. The first of the stones was a ruby, which in Hebrew was called hell, red, because of its red color, and was associated with the Reuven's knee. Ruby is traditionally considered to be associated with the spring month of Nisan and the constellation of Aries. Nisan is named in the Torah as the first month of the year, and Reuven was the first, eldest son of Jacob. Topaz. The second stone in the breastplate of the high priest, yellow topaz. It is associated with the name of Shimon, the second son of Jacob. Topaz is associated with the month of Iyar and, accordingly, with the constellation of Taurus. The third of the stones we are considering is an emerald. In Hebrew, it is called berkat, from the word barak, and it is associated with the name of Levi, the third son of Jacob. The stone is associated with the month of Sivan and the constellation Gemini. Garnet, Nophe, it is associated with the name of Yehuda, the fourth son of Jacob, and it was traditionally associated with the month of Tammuz and the zodiac sign of Cancer. Sapir, it is associated with the name of Issachar, the fifth son of Yaakov. Almaz, Yalam, is connected with the name of Zvulun of the sixth son of Yaakov. The Hebrew name of the stone can be transcribed as, the Lord is here, Yud Kelam. Jewish astrology connects the diamond with the month of Tishrei. In this month the Jewish New Year is celebrated, and the chronology is counted from it, and with the sign of Libra. Opal, Leshem, it is associated with the name of Dan. Jewish astrology associates it with the month of Heshvan and, accordingly, with the sign of the Scorpion. Turquoise, Shivo. It is associated with the name of Naphtali. This stone is associated with the month of Kislev and with the sign. Amethyst, Alama, is associated with the name of Gad. But in ancient Aramaic, Gad means happiness. Aquamarine, Tarshish, is the 10th stone from the breastplate of the high priest. It is associated with the name of Asher. This stone is associated with the month of Tevet and with the sign Onyx, Shoam. Onyx, the penultimate stone on the high priest's breastplate, is traditionally associated with the month of Shvat and the constellation of Aquarius. It is associated with the name of Joseph, the favorite son of Jacob. Jasper, Aspa. It is associated with the name of the youngest of the sons of Jacob, Binyamin. Jasper is associated with the month of Adar and the astrological sign of Pisces. This is the stone that Lazarus put in first. As soon as the last stone was put in, the noise of the water stream increased, and the stones and slabs that blocked the passage trembled. The floor beneath them tilted and all the stones and slabs of the slide slid into the opening. As soon as the last stone slid off, the floor fell back into place. Before the eyes of newcomers, a spacious road opened, going into the depths of the mountain. When all this process was completed, the stone that Lazarus brought and inserted fell out, and water flowed from the hole where it stood, which flowed down the gutter under the bridge into the underground river. Lazarus put this stone in his pocket. The chief and the tribesmen who accompanied him lit torches, and all moved forward along the open road. The road was wide enough for the llama-drawn cart to move freely. On the sides of the road there were 2 troughs that were flowed with clear mountain water. And the water began to flow through them as soon as the road was cleared of the collapse. Water flowed down these troughs into the river under the bridge they had crossed before the blockage. Dispelling the darkness, torches suddenly illuminated that the road ends in a dead end. There was no road beyond, but a stone wall, barely touched by hands of men. On this wall there was a picture of a warrior in a helmet from the time of King David with a harp in his right hand and the open palm of his left hand. And it is visible that the image of the palm was damaged by the time itself, and in its place there was some kind of recess. Everyone got out of the carts and stared at the image in silence. Water flowed into the gutters at the edges of the road from holes in the lower edge of the wall. The chief came over and examined the hollow where the palm of his right hand had been. Lazarus stood next to the chief and realized what had drawn the chief's attention to the notch. It vaguely resembled the recess in the painting before the blockage. Lazarus took the stone from his pocket and plunged it into the hole. The silence around them was suddenly broken by the sound of a sharply amplifying stream of water through the channels next to the road. The stone wall blocking the road began to descend slowly. They had to wait for a long time, but when they entered the open space they saw a mountain of silver ingots lying on the stone floor of a large cave, through which an underground river flowed. Bernard was the first to enter the cave, and began to examine it. Suddenly he called to Lazarus and pointed to a stone niche cut in the wall in which stood a small candlestick designed for 9 candles. It was the only gold object in the room. The middle oil cup was slightly higher than the others. When they examined the candlestick, they saw that in this cup there was a small stone with Hebrew characters wrapped in parchment, and a silver ring with 3 turrets also wrapped in parchment, on which there was also an inscription in Hebrew letters. Bernard put the findings in a bag, and they decided to study them later. 6. At last they were back in La Rochelle. The city is located 150 kilometers south of Nantes and 70 kilometers north of Rouen at the mouth of the river Gironde. The city, as Lazarus now saw, was well fortified and impregnable from both sea and land. The Templar residents there controlled a vast area, and 7 Templar roads converged on it from all sides of France. Along one of these roads, barrels of imported silver were sent to the Templar bank. But neither Lazarus nor Bernard saw it. Under cover of night, they secretly left the ship, guarded in the port by silent masked knights. Knowing the route from where the silver was brought could really threaten their lives. They mingled with the pilgrims on the St. James Road. In Spain, their paths parted, as they thought, forever. That was the end of the recording. Lazarus took the sheets of memories from his daughter's hands, looked at them, and put them in a silver casket, where they belong. Not only the sheets with the description of previous memories were there, but also the ring found in the cave. Yes, they took a candle holder, a stone with Hebrew letters, and a ring with turrets as souvenirs. The candlestick and the stone with the Hebrew letters remained with Bernard, and Lazarus took the ring for his daughter. He knew what the ring was and what it was for. On the parchment in which the ring was wrapped, it was written, "Put me as a seal on your heart, as a ring on your hand, for love is strong as death." The ring grants the owner God's blessing, and is able to fulfill the most intimate desires. It helps to realize that the main thing in a person's life is to know themselves, accurately and soberly evaluate their desires. The seal gives wisdom to recognize the inner light that gives the desired changes, events that can bring balance and peace of mind to life. He did not translate this inscription correctly to Bernard. He said that it was just a symbol of the memory of the temple. He also didn't tell him that these were the words from Song of Songs 8-6. Since the ancient times, the Jews had a custom that many no longer remember. Not all Jewish families remember this custom, and very few observe it, but Lazarus knew about it. Under the dome, young people who have decided to link their fate pronounce the oath of loyalty. This oath is fixed by a ring that the groom puts on his betrothed on the ring finger of his right hand. Since ancient times, the groom puts his betrothed on the index finger of his right hand another special ring. With this special ring he confirmed that the betrothed becomes the mistress of his house. Moreover, this ring is not quite ordinary, it is made in the form of a house or fortress. This is a traditional Jewish wedding decoration that carries a symbolic and deep meaning. This symbolic jewel was extremely important for the groom and the betrothed. And a ring in the form of a house with carved windows and high towers necessarily decorated the finger of the newlywed on the wedding day. It meant that from the moment of marriage, everything becomes common for newlyweds. They now have one house, one roof over their heads, that unites them. The unusual ring symbolized the creation of a union as strong as this tiny fortress, which could not be destroyed. It was believed that the observance of this rite blesses and strengthens the new family. It is also believed that the shape of the building on the ring symbolizes the great temple in Jerusalem, which was destroyed. The ring was placed on the index finger. This was done because the artery of love passing through it carried the blood directly to the heart. But since it was very bulky, and sometimes occupied several centimeters, it was worn only once on the wedding day. Then it was put away in a box and stored for many years for inheritance. There were no jewels on these rings to emphasize the purity and selflessness of the union of two loving hearts. This tradition of the Jewish wedding ceremony speaks of a careful and reverent attitude to family and marriage. The symbolic ring, as a symbol of home and loyalty, shows the deep value of the family. Lazarus remembered reading from the ancient Greek writer Plutarch why rings are usually worn on the ring finger. According to the legend, the ancient Greeks wore a ring on the finger closest to the little finger of the left hand. The reason for this is that when dissecting human bodies according to the custom adopted in Egypt, the Greeks call it anatomy, it was found that from one of these fingers a certain fine nerve leaves and reaches the heart. Therefore, it was considered appropriate to honor this finger with such an accessory, as the closest way involved in the heart and the body. Therefore, there is also a rule according to which the ring on the ring finger indicates the employment of the heart of the person wearing it. Lazarus remembered what was written about the things they found: a golden Hanukkah, a stone with Hebrew characters, and a ring in the form of a house with carved windows and high towers, in the parchment found with these things. The stone is the fifth element from the ring of the forefather Benjamin. The ring belonged to the Queen of Sheba, Makeda. The description of the candlestick, Hanukkah, has not been preserved. This part of the parchment crumbled as they unfolded it. The description also stated that all these things have the highest blessing and are endowed with special properties. What properties exactly, there was no note about it. Before parting, he and Bernard agreed that Bernard would take the candlestick and the stone and give it to the chosen one. He would not say anything about the ring. On July 13, 1941, traces of the spiritual amulet of Belarus, the cross of Saint Euphrosyne of Polotsk, the cup of Peter the Great, a Greek sword and other Mogilev treasures were lost. Speaking of the 12 as a symbol of harmony, it is contrasted with the 13, the devil's dozen, which has long caused superstitious awe in the hearts of people. And the concept of triskaidekaphobia, fear of number 13, is widespread around the world. In many countries, people try to avoid the number 13. For example, in the United States there are no 13th buses, in France there are no houses number 13, in some planes the 12th seat is followed by the 14th. Many hotels don't have a 13th room or a 13th floor. Why? This question has always interested me. I was born on December 12th, my dad was born on July 13th, and both of these days are happy for me. From historical facts, it is clear that the number 13 is not only happy for me. Among the Mayans and Aztecs, 13 was considered a sacred number and was not associated with the concept of death. In their mythology, the sky was divided into 13 levels, each of which had its own god. In the calendar of the ancient inhabitants of South America, there were 13-day weeks. Jesus Christ was the 13th participant in the Last Supper, along with the 12 apostles. The very name of Jesus Christ is written in Greek with 13 letters. The symbolism of the number 13 is present in many drawings of the $1 bill. Officially, this is considered to mean the number of states originally united. The number 13 is represented in all elements of the U.S. coat of arms. We see above the eagle's head there is a star made up of 13 stars. In the left paw, the eagle holds 13 arrows, in the right there is an olive branch with 13 leaves and 13 berries. Even the motto, A pluribus unum, out of many, one, contains 13 letters. The red and white stripes on the U.S. flag also add up to 13. 13 is the symbol of the Jewish people, consisting of the 12 tribes of Israel and the 13th tribe of the Khazars. King Louis of France, by the way, the 13th, considered the number 13 happy. He even married Anna of Austria when she was 13 years old. The Kabbalah speaks of the 13 fountains of heaven, the 13 gates of mercy, and the 13 rivers of balsam that the pious will find in paradise. But in Christianity, 13 is a symbol of betrayal. It is especially unfortunate if 13 falls on a Friday. The most convincing version of the origin of this day's notoriety is related to the events of October 13, 1307. It was on this day, on Friday the 13th, with the support of King Philip IV of France, the beautiful Pope Clement V, who had long dreamed of getting the riches of the Templar order and destroying them, staged a real massacre. Many knights of this order were captured that day, accused of heresy, and burned at the stake or tortured. Triskaidekaphobes, people who are afraid of the number 13. Paraskevadekatriophobia, people who are afraid of Friday the 13th. In China, number 13 is still perceived as an intrusion into a closed astrological system consisting of the 12 signs of the zodiac. So here again, 13 is considered the number of death. In China, when using the lunar calendar, in which the year lasted 354 days, after a certain number of years, it was necessary to add the 13th leap month, which was considered unlucky. People are afraid of the number 13 for the same reason that they are afraid of everything new, unwillingness to change their habits. And the past stirs up fear, trying to convince people that 13 is an unlucky number. The ill-fated damned dozen, 13, was disliked by the ancient Greeks. Hesiod, 8 to 7 centuries BC, in the poem, Works and Days, warned farmers to start sowing on the 13th in order to avoid a crop failure. In the Babylonian leap year, there was a leap month that was given the sign Raven of Misfortune. And in our time, due to the fear of the number 13 in some hotels in the UK and USA, there are no rooms with the number 13, the elevator does not stop on the 13th floor, in the numbering it is simply skipped. There are no such urban transport routes, and airlines of most countries possess the planes that do not have the tail number 13. Athletes avoid putting this number on their t-shirts. But there are 13 Buddhas in the Indian pantheon. The same number of mystical discs on Chinese and Indian pagodas. In Japan, the temple of Artias houses a sacred saber with 13 sacramental items forming its handle. At the end of the X century in Novgorod a wooden cathedral of Saint Sophia was built, about the 13 tops, symbolizing Jesus and the 12 apostles. In the first half of the 11th century, the temple burned down. But the unusual 13-headed name became widespread in stone buildings of later times. In particular, it can be seen at the St. Sophia Cathedral in Kiev. On July 13, 1941, traces of the spiritual amulet of Belarus, the cross of St. Euphrosyne of Polotsk, the cup of Peter the Great, a Greek sword and other Mogilev treasures were lost. Nikita Moiseyevich Zotov especially distinguished himself in the Azov campaign of 1695 to 1696, where he was in charge of the campaign office of Tsar Peter the Great. At the triumphal procession after the victory of Azov, Zotov, with a shield and a saber in his hands, proudly sat in the royal carriage at the head of the ceremony. For Azov Nikita Moiseyevich received from Peter, a cup with a roof, a gold kaftan on sables, at the price of 200 rubles, and 40 yards in the patrimony. It was a very old cup, from the king's treasury. The cup was made in November 1605 in Krakow. When the wedding of Dmitri and Marina was celebrated, the groom was represented at the ceremony by his guarantor, Dyak A. Vlasev. On the cup, the famous Augsburg engraver Luka Kilian made engraved portraits of Dmitri and Marina. Under each image he placed the imperial crowns, and above the portraits he put the Russian state emblem, a double-headed eagle. Near the image of Dmitri, a Latin inscription said that it represented Dmitri, Emperor of Moscow, the husband of Marina Nishek. The inscription under the image of Marina confirmed that this was Marina Nishek, the wife of Demetrius, Emperor of Muscovy. There was also a date, 112. Interestingly, in ancient Russia there was its own chronology, borrowed from Byzantium along with Christianity. According to this chronology, the years were counted from the creation of the world. If we count from the year in which the events described took place, 1605, as we have indicated above, then the creation of the world took place 7,113 years ago. The year 1605 was 7,113 according to the chronology adopted in pre-Petrine Russia. Another chronology, from the birth of Christ, adopted then in Western Europe, in Russia was adopted only in 1700s under Peter. This chronology is currently used in Russia, as well as in the whole world. In everyday life, the full designation of the year, 7109, was most often not used. The first digit was omitted, just as we often say, for example, not 1990s, but simply the 90s. Therefore, the date was truncated on the cup, 113. There is a simple rule for translating the dates from the creation of the world to the modern chronology. 5508 should be subtracted from the old date. Kilian Luka, Kilian, Lucas, 1579 to 1667, who engraved this cup, is a German engraver from Augsburg. Luke's father, Lazarus Bogshaw, a master, died early. Luka studied art with his stepfather, the famous Dominicus Custos, from Antwerp. Moving from city to city, Kilian Luka creates many prints reproducing paintings by famous Italian artists. Thanks to his work, today we can get an idea of many works of Titian, Veronese, Tintoretto and others that have not come down to us. His characteristic, pictorial, technique of working with a chisel, which transmits the finest shades of chiaroscuro, made him famous throughout Europe. The glass of the cup that the Tsar gave to Nikita Moiseyevich Zotov changed color if alcohol was poured into it. The head of the Jesuits in Muscovy, the Holy Father, sat at the table and silently looked at the blank sheet. The letter he decided to write to the Vatican was not a simple one. In this letter, he must admit the defeat of his mission, and justify himself to the Vatican. The Jesuits tried to persuade the Muscovites to unite with the Catholic Church, in which they failed. They saw the failure of their mission, in particular, in the machinations of powerful Jews. There are quite a lot of Jewish families here who came from neighboring Poland, he wrote. Although they are baptized, they observe the rites secretly, or even quite openly, as they did before. And such people are promoted to the first positions. One of them is in charge of the office of His Highness the Tsar. The data that the Holy Father gave in his letter were distinguished by accuracy and thoroughness. Zotov's Jewish roots were well studied by meticulous Jesuits. He came from Belarusian Jews. 7. Zotov's ancestor, who arrived in Moscow, was a foreigner of the Jew breed. Zotov himself was raised with the Russian Orthodox culture, and was a fierce zealot of it. Like other Jews at court, he zealously serves the cause of Peter the I, wrote the Holy Father. In order to justify his mission, he began to cite the example of other Jews. Antonio de Vieira is the page of Peter the Great. His father, Manuel de Vieira, was a Portuguese Jew who moved with his family to Holland. He was reputed to be an excellent gunsmith, but his early death prevented him from passing on his skills to his son, Peter Pavlovich Shafarov. A baptized Jew diplomat, the head of the post office, mining and metallurgy, who manages foreign trade. Many others, foreigners of the Jew breed. The Holy Father looked at the writing again and continued, "The servant we hired to watch Nikita in his house told us that Zatov constantly goes to Silver Sloboda to the silversmith's house, which is under the authority of the Silver Order. This master is responsible for making silverware for the royal court. He is a freelance, and receives a regular, sovereign, salary. A woman lives in the house of the master, with whom Nikita constantly meets. According to the servant we hired, this woman has a son with Nikita. We have hired a maid who lives in this master's house. She said that the owner of the house is Anisia, who goes to Nikita Zatov. The master and his family live in a house with a workshop on the farmstead. The maid heard Nikita call her Esther several times. My son's name is Moses, in honor of Nikita Moisevich Zatov's father. According to the maid, the child was given a name at birth by saints. We checked it out. The name Moses can be called Orthodox. It was worn by many Orthodox saints and ascetics. Among the ornaments of the mistress, the maid saw a strange silver ring with turrets and houses. The maid says that the mistress never wears it. But she often takes it in her hands and looks at it thoughtfully for a long time, and says, "Put me as a seal on your heart, as a ring on your hand, for love is strong as death." The Holy Father stopped writing and thought. He came to the main thing that he wanted to write and report. The Jesuit knew that his letter might fall into the wrong hands, and then the responsibility of divulging the secret he had learned would fall on him. He couldn't go himself. The only way out is to send a secret messenger, whom he fully trusts. But he didn't trust anyone, and he doesn't trust anyone. The Holy Father did not even trust the secret script that he intended to encode the letter with. After much thought, he decided to send a coded letter by pigeon mail to Poland, with instructions to urgently transmit it to the Vatican. Satisfied with his decision, the Jesuit sipped his wine and continued the letter. As you remember, Your Eminence, in the testimony of a captured and then escaped Knight Templar, which was found in the archive by our librarians, he tells about a candlestick, a stone with Hebrew characters and a ring with turrets. The Templar was convinced that all these artifacts were taken by the Jew Lazarus, who was with him. The Templar claimed that Lazarus escaped when the ships arrived at the port of La Rochelle. May I remind Your Eminence that the parchment we found in this Templar's possession contains a record of the stone and the ring. In this parchment, according to the Templar, a stone and a ring were wrapped. The record of the candlestick almost disappeared with time and we couldn't read it. The stone with Hebrew characters, as written in parchment, was the sixth element of the ring of Benjamin, and the ring with turrets belonged to the first king of Israel, Shaul, Shmuel I. It was also written that the true essence of the ring will appear when it is put on by a chosen woman. Given Nikita's Jewish connections, I think he has something to do with Lazarus. I ask your permission to secretly kidnap Nikita Zatov's girlfriend along with the child. This will help us solve many puzzles. The Holy Father folded the letter and placed it in the capsule. The Jesuit rang the bell for a servant, who was ordered to tie the capsule to a carrier pigeon and send it to Poland with a message to deliver urgently to the Vatican. Nikita Zatov was woken up in the morning by the clerk of the Tsar's office with a report that a carrier pigeon sent from the court of the Papal Jesuits had been intercepted. For a year now, the Royal Chancery had watched the Jesuits' antics without interfering. Letters were intercepted, were copied by scribes, and sent to the original destination. The stableman, the servant who tended the carrier pigeons, and even the cook were paid by the Royal Chancery. Nikita Zatov ordered this to be done a year ago, when he was informed about the special attention of the Jesuits to his person. The close deacon who had woken Nikita handed him a sheet with a transcribed and decoded message. Zatov's first desire was to destroy the Jesuit compound, but he controlled his anger. It's early, we need to prepare, he thought. Send the letter to its destination, he ordered the clerk. When the Holy Father was informed that the wife and child who lived in the Silver Sloboda, in the house of the silversmith, suddenly disappeared along with all the servants, he knew at once that his letter had been intercepted, and that his life and freedom were in danger. Nikita Zatov is in charge of the office of His Highness the Tsar, and his power in Muscovy is great. In the evening, an elderly man with a waist-long beard came out of the Jesuit compound with his servants. He went to the Ascension Monastery and was never seen again. The commander of Army Group Center of the Wehrmacht, Field Marshal von Bock, received a strange dispatch from Berlin on December 1, 1941. Stop fighting on the territory from Ryazan to Murom, assist the chief of the Sonderkommando Ahnenerbe in the search for an ancient Jewish shrine. The Sonderkommando Ahnenerbe was created under the leadership of the Minister for Nationalities, Dr. Alfred Rosenberg, who was directly subordinate to the Reichsführer of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. The Sonderkommando units were formed depending on the tasks assigned to different ministries. Such tasks were, for example, the assessment of mineral reserves in the occupied territories or the export of cultural values to Germany, and others, including SS Sonderkommando engaged in repression against the civilian population. An ancient Jewish shrine, which the Sonderkommando Ahnenerbe had to try to find, was the so-called Agric sword, which once belonged to King Germanerich. And indeed, in ancient chronicles there is a legend about the existence of a certain sword, the owner of which becomes invincible. It was forged by Agric, the son of King Herod, a famous Jewish king. This is the story of Peter and Favronia Muromsky, created in the 16th century. Its author, most likely, was the scribe-theologian Yermolai Erasmus. He was the one to create a work that gained almost the greatest popularity in Russia of all that was written before Peter I. The story of Peter and Favronia, a complex, multi-layered, sometimes a mysterious thing. In the foreground, adventures, a battle with a dark monster, a serpent, love conquering class prejudices, the Boyar revolt and its collapse, in other words, a fascinating intrigue. But if you dig deeper, you find another layer. The author seems to be conducting a dialogue through the text with a small circle of scribes like him. He inserts symbols, ciphers, and signs into the story. To this day, scientists unravel the code, the story of, there lived the Murom Prince Pavel. And so his wife took a fancy to the flying serpent, who took the form of a betrothed. But Paul's wife was not simple either. She managed to find out how to send the tempter to the other world, from Petrov's shoulder, from Agric's sword. The identity of the perpetrator of the death penalty was obvious, it was Pavel's younger brother Peter. But he only knew that the sword belonged to the hero Agric, who, in turn, received it as a trophy after a fight with the king of the Goths, Germanerich. But where is he now? Nevertheless, after a long search, Peter found the weapon in the cache and went out to fight to the death. And the serpent, as soon as he saw his death in the hands of the enemy, took the usual form, although he could not escape from the massacre, because Prince Peter cut it in half. However, even after his death, the serpent continued its tricks. His blood, which fell on the body of Peter, began to turn into scabs. No procedures prescribed by doctors could help to get rid of the disease. And only the healer Ephrosinia, Favronia, from the remote village of Erzia helped Peter cope with the disease. In the guise of Favronia, the girl was an all-powerful sorceress, and in the guise of Euphrosyne, she was a real beauty. So Prince Peter took a fancy to her. In the end, it came to the wedding. After the death of Pavel, Peter ascended to the throne, but he did not manage to rule for a long time. According to one version, the influential residents of Murom were dissatisfied with the marriage of the prince with a village girl, and Peter was forced to resign his power. Moreover, the hostile atmosphere around the young couple forced the couple to retire to a monastery. Later they became saints. According to the memoirs of the employee of the Mogilev Museum named after Filipovich, Mogilev treasures were placed in a safe room of the Mogilev Regional Party Committee, which was left from the land bank, measuring 3 by 5 meters and locked with secret locks of 2 steel doors, armored and latticed. Pyotr Karitanovich Podubsky, a driver who took out museum exhibits, Mogilev treasures, on the route Smolensk-Mozhaysk, Moscow in 1941. Podubsky, in particular, said that the convoy in which he was, with a valuable cargo, arrived safely in Moscow. But there were several columns with valuable cargo. and one of them didn't make it to their destination. The director of the museum, who was supposed to accompany them, returned back to Mogilev. According to him, Kolum was bombed by the Germans, and all the valuables were destroyed. Before the war, the Mogilev Museum had valuables, which could be the envy of the fabulous Ali Baba: gold and silver keys of Mogilev, silver prints given to the city by the Magdeburg Rite, the gold jewelry found in the excavations of Pompeii, the silver mace of the king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Sigismund vases. There was a famous Slutsk and 20 other gospels. The icon of the Belinikai Mother of God of the 15th century covered with gems, Spa's Sky Dame in a frame 1670, and other image, in gold and silver gilt frames, decorated with diamonds, as well as 160 icons letters 13, 18th century by the Belarusian craftsman. Saint Euphrosyne's cross and diamond rings, George Kaniski's silver mitre, Catherine II's throne chair, Napoleon's sleigh, Boravikovsky's paintings, collections of Belarusian clothing, Agric's sword, Peter the Great's cup, and much more. The list of missing relics and the act of their value was made on December 22, 1944 by the pre-war director of the Mogilev Museum Ivan Migulin, who returned to his motherland after liberation and again became the head of the museum. It included 89 items. But he was obviously lying when he said that he listed them from memory. He described everything in too much detail. In the Commissions Act in 1944, all this was called damage caused by the German fascist invaders and their accomplices. The director himself claimed the following: from the first days of the war, despite the absence of my right hand, which was lost in the Civil War, I joined the militia. On the instructions of party committee, in the Polikovichi village I caught German saboteurs. On June 29, I arrived to Mogilev. In the building of the regional committee, where valuables were located, I was not allowed by the police squad. I went to the security officers, who informed me that all the museum employees had evacuated. I asked the security officers, what should I do with the museum property? An unknown major ordered me to guard the valuables. However, I took the train with my family that day and went to the rear, thinking that the valuables had already been taken out. I didn't check to see if it was true. The director swore that he really wanted to take them to the countryside. For starters, at least further away from Mogilev, which was being approached by the fascists. But in the midst of the evacuation, he was arrested by the commandant of the city as an alarmist. He was saved from execution only by the intervention of an officer friend. Fearing arrest, he joined the militia. And when he returned to the city, there was no one in the regional party committee. Therefore, on June 29, he put the family on the train. He wanted to get out of the car, but the patrol did not let him out. On the way to Gorky, he threw the keys to the armored safe room out of the car window. The ex-director of the museum did not say why he did it. Migulin referred to the fact that his alibi can be confirmed by the deputy chairman of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the BSSR of that time, Ivan Klimov, who acquitted before witnesses and defended Migulin. Director of the Mogilev Museum Ivan Migulin was ahead of the museum from 1934 to 1969. My grandmother Esther with my grandfather Yoin and my father's younger brother Samuel were evacuated to Mangishlak. Everything repeats itself in life. Once our ancestors, along with the Khazars, already escaped to this peninsula. After the victory over the Kagan, the army of Prince Svyatoslav captured Kazan. The historian Ibn Hakel writes, the Rus destroyed everything and plundered everything that belonged to the people of the Khazars, Bulgars, and Burdas on the Itl River. The Rus took possession of this country, and the inhabitants sought refuge on the island of Babalabwaba and fortified themselves on it, and some of them settled on the island of Siaku. Moving the population of the Khazarans, the elite of the state, by sea during a war with the Rus fleet indicates the presence of a strong and sufficient large fleet in the Khazars. Thus, part of the Khazars fled to Siaki. This is the Mangishlak Peninsula. My grandmother told me that the real history of Mangishlak is 1,000 years old. And all these 1,000 years there was a struggle for the peninsula between two major variations of the Turks, the Kipchaks, ancestors of the Kazakhs, Tatars, and Nogais, and the Oghuz, ancestors of the Turks, Azeris, and Turkmens. It is evident even in the name. According to the main version, the Turkmen Mangişlak is 1,000 villages, and the Kazakh Mangistau is 1,000 winter quarters. In the Arab chronicles, the peninsula is first mentioned as Siyaku, Black Mountain. I asked, "What is Mangişlak?" She replied, "It is primarily a desert, which briefly becomes a heath in the spring. There is shriveled clay and hard stone under its thin layer, sticking out of the ground here and there. But there is little water and vegetation, and therefore Mangişlak is a huge deserted space. Anhydrous Mangişlak is the land of the banks. The main element of its landscape is chinks. The chinks are nothing more than ancient cliffs, the shores of long-dried seas, of which only the Caspian now remains. Chinks are steep cliffs from several dozens to a couple of hundred meters in height. They can stretch for many kilometers without a single gentle descent, and to what you can see from the edge of the chink a couple of kilometers away from you, it can take several days of travel. But with almost no permanent rivers and streams, spring on Mangişlak is quite rainy, and the flowing water gradually erodes the slopes of the chinks. But there is only enough water here to run down the slope, eroding the clay, spread out at the bottom and immediately evaporate. In chinks there are impressive canyons with a dry bottom in early May. Their rocky walls, eroded by rapid waters, sometimes have a sheer slope. Instead of lakes, there are the soras in the desert, snow-white salt marshes that fill with water for a short time in the spring, then become viscous swamps, and finally, a completely flat, hard and slightly rough surface. In its raw form, it is an impassable swamp. The valleys between the White Mountains and Black Mountains are famous for an abundance of stone spheres. I have heard several hypotheses about their origin. It could be nodules that grew around inclusions like grains, caught in the silt of ancient reservoirs, or masses of rock fused by underground lightning, giant discharges of static electricity from the friction of rocks in tectonic splits. The oldest settlement in Asia, Fort Shevchenko, where we were settled, had a romantic sound to it. It is no accident that Taras Shevchenko served here, in fact, in exile. In 1881, almost the first monument to Taras Shevchenko was opened here. It has not reached our days, but in the local park there are two monuments of the Ukrainian poet who got here unwillingly in 1850. Taras Grigorievich was arrested for, as it was said in the prosecution, impudent poems, blasphemies against the imperial personages, and dangerous ideas about Ukrainian statehood. By the verdict of the court, Taras was relegated back to the small people. But the paradox of the desert is that you are constantly observing life in it. Of course, there is actually much less life here than in a forest or on a grassy plain. There are a lot of creatures like snakes, salper, phalanges, scorpions, or centipedes. Turtles are lying on the roads like cobblestones. A cow or a lamb is rare in Mangişlak pastures. Kumis and its camel counterpart Shubat are sold in bazaars. Without much detail, the Caspian looks quite like a real sea. This is what my grandmother told me. She also told about the amazing ring that helped them survive the evacuation. My grandmother didn't work, my grandfather earned a living. He treated people and did dental prosthetics. People didn't have any money, they paid with food. He helped a lot of people for free. They lived in poverty. People around suffered from a lack of water, and the available water was bad, and there were a lot of people with gastrointestinal diseases. My grandmother had a ring. The is one of the two rings that her grandfather put on her under the chuppah. According to Jewish tradition, it is customary to put a ring on the bride's index finger. According to Jewish law, the groom must sanctify the bride by means of some valuable object. This act means that the bride becomes separated from everyone and dedicated only to the groom. From time immemorial, it is customary to do this with the help of a ring, since marriage gets legal force precisely as a result of the handing of the ring to a woman. Jewish women wear a wedding ring on their right index finger. My grandparents always adhered to national traditions. In the Soviet Union, if you honor tradition and do not like to answer unnecessary questions, you should wear the ring as most of the spouses around you wear it. If you prefer a different solution, prepare for the fact that it may be misinterpreted. So on the day of the wedding, my grandfather gave my grandmother another ring, which she wore on the ring finger of her left hand, just like everyone else. Here's what my grandmother told me about it. The Jews had a belief that the index finger has a certain nerve or vein that directly connects it to the heart. This finger was connected to the heart for a reason. The Jews knew human anatomy very well. As it turned out, it was from the index finger on the right hand that a thin nerve ran all the way to the heart. The Romans, who adopted this custom, even had a special name for it, the vein of love, lat. Vena amoris. The ancient Romans were the first to wear a wedding ring on the ring finger of the right hand. At that time, the left hand was considered unlucky and unreliable. They began to wear a wedding ring on the ring finger of their right hand in accordance with the science of palmistry. According to palmistry, the line running from the ring finger to the fold of the palm is the line of love. In 860, Pope Nicholas I issued a decree that the wedding ring was officially certified. There was only one requirement: the wedding ring must be golden. During Jewish wedding ceremonies, some young people give their brides not one, but 2 rings. Moreover, one of the rings is not quite ordinary, it is made in the form of a house or fortress. This is a traditional Jewish wedding decoration that carries a symbolic and deep meaning. To be honest, not all Jewish families remember this custom, and very few observe it. In some families, they are passed down from generation to generation as a family heirloom. This symbolic jewel is extremely important for the bride and groom. And a ring in the form of a house with carved windows and high towers necessarily decorated the finger of the newlywed on the wedding day. It meant that from the moment of marriage, everything becomes common for newlyweds. They now have one house, one roof over their heads, that unites them. The unusual ring symbolized the creation of a union as strong as this tiny fortress, which could not be destroyed. It was believed that the observance of this rite blesses and strengthens the new family. It is also believed that the shape of the building on the ring symbolizes the great temple in Jerusalem, which was destroyed. The ring was placed on the index finger. This was done because the artery passing through it carried blood directly to the heart. But since it was very bulky, and sometimes occupied several centimeters, it was worn only once on the day of the wedding. Then it was put away in a box and stored for many years for inheritance. Symbolic ancient rings carry a centuries-old energy charge. They are priceless, carefully guarded, like family values in secret places. Usually such rings were made of pure silver, gold or platinum. There were no jewels on them to emphasize the purity and unselfishness of the union of 2 loving hearts. This tradition of the Jewish wedding ceremony speaks of a careful and reverent attitude to family and marriage. Before the start of the wedding ceremony, the bride and groom stand under the chuppah, the wedding canopy. Chuppah symbolizes the groom's house, into which he introduces the bride. Under the chuppah, the betrothal ceremony is performed. The groom puts a ring on the bride's finger and thus acquires her as his wife. At the same time, he says, "Behold, you are consecrated to me as a wife by this ring according to the law of Moshe and Israel." From this moment on, the bride is separated from all other men and belongs only to her husband, dedicated to him. The ring is put on the index finger of the right hand. The witnesses declare 3 times, "Consecrated, Mekudshet, Mekudshet, Mekudshet." The others repeat after them. From this moment on, the young are considered husband and wife. Then the tubah, the contract of the groom's obligations to the bride, is read out publicly. The tubah describes the obligations that the groom assumes for the duration of married life, and also sets the amount of material insurance in the event of the death of the husband or divorce. Then Shiva Brakot is read, 7 wedding blessings, and at the end of the ceremony the groom breaks the glass, because even in the most joyful moments of life, we must remember the destruction of the temple and the centuries-old exile. After the chuppah, the bride and groom retire for a while in a special room, the Hether Ihud. My grandmother also told me that when my grandfather put a ring with 3 turrets on her finger, he said, "Put me as a seal on your heart, as a ring on your hand, for love is strong as death." Grandma Esther opened her box and showed me this ring. It was made of silver darkened by age. The ring was beautiful in its own way, 3 turrets surrounded by a fence. I took it in my hand and felt an incredibly pleasant warmth. My grandmother said that she gave the ring away and now it belongs to my mother, but my mother agreed that it would be kept by my grandmother. My grandparents have a lot of memories associated with this ring. Grandma Esther told me to talk to Grandpa Yoin about the history of the ring. After all, he got it from his mother. The only thing my grandmother told me was how the ring helped them survive in Mangishlak. My grandfather told my grandmother to keep the ring in the water that they would drink. Despite the fact that the water in Mangishlak was bad, and many people suffered very much and got sick from it, neither my grandmother, nor my grandfather, or my father's younger brother Samuel ever got sick until they returned to Kharkiv. The moon and the sun are in the shape of a circle. The ring is also round, and the hole in the center of this circle symbolizes the ancient gateway to all the unknown. There are many versions of where the name silver came from and they are all different. Some say that the name came from the old Germanic word silber, others say that it is from the Austrian serapum, which translates to white metal, silver. In Greek, silver is called argyros, which comes from the word argos, which means brilliant, white, sparkling. In Latin, silver is argentum. Earlier, in the old days, silver was considered a symbol of the moon. Silver combines nobility, intelligence, and refinement. It is not excessively banal, vulgar, or pretentious. Noble women of ancient countries wore many beautiful, chic, large and small jewelry. And they gave their preference not to gold, but to silver, because they knew that it has a cooling effect on the body. In the old days, silver was even called white gold for its beauty and high quality. In those early days, silver mining was much harder than gold mining, and that is why silver was valued more than gold and other gems. Silver is a very rare metal. They say that silver connects man with the space. Silver also has antimicrobial properties. Silver has its disadvantages: it is quickly oxidized. Oxidation occurs when silver interacts with oxygen in the air. We often notice that our silver jewelry begins to darken for no apparent reason. And no matter when they were purchased or cleaned, the black color quickly begins to penetrate and absorb the bright and light color of silver. Long ago, people attributed the change in the color of silver to the presence of a disease in a person. Jewelry can darken both from external factors and factors related to internal processes in the body. Prolonged contact with the skin may cause darkening. It is worth noting that this metal behaves differently with different people. Sometimes it darkens in a matter of minutes, and with other people, it may not change its color for years. This is due to the state of the body and the health of the owner of the decoration. This is due to the release of secretions from sebaceous and sweat glands. Silver and silver products have a good effect on human health. If a person is suffering from dysentery, then it is necessary to keep silver in the water for 24 to 28 hours and drink it daily. Water, which was made in this way, is beneficial for human health. It drives giardia from the liver, it can cure liver, gallbladder inflammation, it will heal the stomach and gastrointestinal tract. Water, where the silver was kept, is called silvered water. This silvered water is used to wash the intestines. For prevention purposes, silvered water can be consumed every day. It will help your body fight against various types of microbes and clear it of them. You can also use silvered water to clean up bruises. For example, you need to make a lotion from silver water, which was kept in for at least 48 hours, it will resolve the bruise in a day. If the veins on the legs are inflamed, you can use silvered water. It will help to relieve pain and burning. And if you use it for a week, it can partially remove the deformation of blood vessels. Silver is used against many causing agents of infectious diseases, viruses, some types of parasites and fungi. Silver is widely used in medicine. Silver has the ability to destroy more than 650 types of microbes. Silver is softer than copper, but harder than gold. Silver is a metal that polishes well and has a high reflectivity. Silver is the most electrically conductive and heat-conducting metal. Silver in its pure form is almost never used in jewelry, because this metal has low strength and jewelry made out of it cannot remain for a long time. Jewelry made from the 999 sample is pure silver, produced only in Japan. It differs from other samples by the greatest softness. Therefore, pure silver is not used for making jewelry. If you make a product from pure silver, it quickly loses its shape, it can bend or deform. It is used for the manufacture of ingots and coins, as well as a protective coating of products made of cheap metals. Therefore, when creating silver products, alloys are used. Unlike gold, which is supplemented with two metals when creating jewelry, it is enough to add one metal to silver to ensure that the product meets the standards of strength. The main component is copper. To find out the quantitative content of copper, ligature, that is, the metal that is added to the main composition of the product, you need a fineness. This is a special mark that is placed on the product in the form of a brand and means the ratio of the precious metal to the ligature, that is, the metal that is added to the main composition. The sample of 925 means that the product contains 925 grams of silver and 75 grams of alloying metals. Fineness 925 belongs to the category of silver jewelry and is the most common type. The low percentage of ligature content gives jewelry with such a breakdown a pure luster that is characteristic of pure silver. 925 jewelry is distinguished by its charming beauty, dazzling white color and pleasant shine. A moderate soft consistency makes it possible for jewelers to make beautiful jewelry that perfectly retain its shape and can be worn for a long time. Another name for such silver is sterling. This is due to the name of the coins in England that are worth 1 sterling, which were minted from silver of this fineness. I was very interested in the composition and fineness of my grandmother's, my mother's, and now my wife's, ring. With great difficulty I managed to persuade them to entrust me with the ring for a few hours. After receiving the ring, I rushed to the Department of Geography and Geology, University of Kharkiv, named after Karazin. I have previously agreed that I will make a chemical analysis of the ring's composition. After the department employee took a scrape from the inner wall of the ring, I went to the assay control, where they set samples for jewelry. Of course, without the help of a relative who worked at the Kharkiv jewelry factory, I would not have been accepted, and the study would not be conducted. The ring turned out to be 925. I waited almost a month for the chemical analysis, which was performed by spectral analysis. The result surprised not only me, but also those who conducted the analysis. It turned out that they sent the scrapings to the Academy of Sciences laboratory for research. In the composition of the alloys, aside from copper, there were unknown minerals. The latter included nickel iron, and iron chloride, lavranite, oxides, calcium phosphates, silicon, and iron sulfide. These elements were previously found only in meteorites. The isotopic date showed that the meteor appeared about 4.5 billion years ago, and once in interplanetary space, fell to Earth 13,000 years ago. Such minerals were found by the French archaeologist Albert Jambon, who studied the chemical composition of the material of beads from Egypt, made in 3200 years BC, the metal of the Turkish dagger, forged in 2500 years BC, the metal of the dagger of Tutankhamun, and several artifacts of the Shang dynasty that existed in 1600 to 1027 BC. Analysis has shown that they were made of meteoric iron. After the meteorites passed through the atmosphere and fell to Earth, the iron contained in them was already in the necessary state for processing. Previously, it was assumed that alloys with a high nickel content were made using or found on Earth. However, the results of geological surveys show that this is not the case. There are no such alloys on Earth. Special power and significance were attributed to meteoric iron. The metal that fell from the sky was considered an undoubted gift of God and had to have miraculous properties. Throughout the East, there was a widespread belief that meteoric iron brings victory and protects from wounds. It helps to develop intuition, the gift of prediction and foresight. Geologists told me, every day up to 6 tons of meteorites fall on the Earth. Some of them cause serious damage, others are scattered in the atmosphere. Officially, the oldest meteorite to reach the Earth's surface is a space object discovered on Mount Washatai near the Chinese city of Xi'an. According to scientists, it fell to Earth about 2 billion years ago. Interestingly, since ancient times the residents of these places referred to it as a sacred mountain duality. This meteorite can also be called the largest. Chinese scientists estimated the size of the celestial giant. It was about 160 by 50 by 60 meters, with a weight of almost 200 tons. To get to the meteorite core, scientists had to drill a hole 50 meters long. Today, the first meteorite park in China has been opened at the site of the crash of a space body, where visitors can widen their knowledge about unusual celestial aliens. In 1920, in what is now Namibia, a farmer called Jacob Hermanus, while plowing the land, came across a huge block of stone. He did not know that he had found a meteorite. The celestial guest was named after the nearby Hobo West farm. The meteorite is mainly composed of iron, so that, despite its rather modest size, a diameter of 2.5 meters, and a volume of 9 cubic meters, its weight reaches 60 tons. According to scientists, the meteorite fell about 80,000 years ago. Curiously, for its size, it left a very small crater, but most likely, according to scientists, the object had a small angle of incidence, and before colliding with the Earth's surface, it slowed down its speed significantly. The possibility of such a fall is confirmed by the shape of the celestial body. It is flat on both sides. Since the meteorite became a landmark, according to experts, it has lost at least 6 tons, the result of vandalism, people trying to chip off a piece of memory. To somehow prevent the theft of the meteorite for souvenirs, in 1955 the local authorities declared it a national monument. In March 1976, residents of the Chinese province of Jilin were literally hit by a stone rain that lasted more than half an hour. However, despite the intensity of the meteor bombardment, no information was received about the damage caused. Scientists found that the speed of the meteor stream was approximately 12 km/sec, and the weight of its fragments reached 12.5 kilograms. Later, they discovered the largest of the objects, a 1.7-ton meteorite called Gyron. As a rule, meteor showers are possible when a larger meteorite is destroyed due to severe overheating in the upper atmosphere. This is evidenced by the testimony of eyewitnesses who reported a strong cannonade of explosions before the fall of stones. The meteorite that fell in 1969 near the Australian town of Murchison does not surprise with huge size. It is only 108 kilograms, but it is known for having more than 14,000 organic compounds, including about 70 amino acids. Interesting sensations that my grandmother, my mother, and my wife told me about. They felt the presence of the ring on the finger constantly, although the ring itself was not on the finger. Usually the ring was put on the index finger of the right hand. This was done because it is traditionally believed that the artery passing through it carries blood directly to the heart. But since it was very bulky and towered several centimeters, they only wore it once on the day of the wedding. Then it was put away in a box and stored for many years for inheritance. This ancient ring carries a centuries-old energy charge. It is priceless, carefully guarded and hidden in a secret place, like a family treasure. On the first page it was written, "Abraham is a Jew." A prince, a Levite, an astrologer, and a philosopher writes to the Jewish people, who are scattered among the Gauls by the wrath of God. On the second page, Abraham comforted his people by advising them to avoid idolatry and wait patiently for the coming of the deliverer, the Messiah. Further, the book contained a number of drawings explaining some of the Kabbalah instructions by which the author was able to obtain gold. The book was made from the bark of some young tree and its leaves were soaked with something after being rolled with an ironing roller. Acting according to the instructions of the book, Flammel received a little bit of gold on April 25, 1382, as the result of a lengthy process. History impartially testifies that Mr. Flamel became rich and over the course of 36 years built 14 hospitals in Paris, and 14 more in Boulogne. Flamel claimed that he spent all the gold on charity and had nothing left, but he and his family continued to live comfortably. This is all I know about the history of this ring. From the words of my mother, I know that when a man puts this ring on his betrothed, he must say, "Put me as a seal on your heart, as a ring on your hand, for love is strong as death." The ring fulfills wishes and helps its owner to realize even the most intimate desires. It is very important to understand that desires must be well considered, real, and should come from the heart and soul. The ring gives the owner God's blessing. It is able to fulfill the most intimate desires. The ring helps you realize that the main thing in a person's life is knowing oneself, accurately and soberly evaluate your desires. The ring gives you the wisdom to recognize the inner light that gives you the desired changes, events that can bring balance and peace of mind to your life. Grandfather Yoin finished his story and silently looked at the ring that was laying on the table between us. I did not sleep after this story all night. Different thoughts occurred to me, but there was one thing I was completely sure of: our family is not ordinary. With my passion for risky actions, which has manifested since childhood, I could repeatedly suffer the consequences, even die. But God, with an invisible shield, protected me at the last moment and averted the trouble away from me. They killed more than 300 girls until the Bishop of Nantes burned Jules de Rice at stake in October 1440. So how could Prelati deceive the Baron? Or is it just a terrible legend? No. This is true. The reason is that Prelati found a gold quartz mine in the Baron's castle Machical, which he secretly worked on nightly. The most astute was the English monarch Henry IV, who issued a law prohibiting the conversion of simple metal into gold. This, however, did not prevent Henry IV from converting his copper money into silver. He saw that when the alchemists would rub the copper with mercury, it would take on a silvery hue. But the mercury was quickly erased, especially from the protruding parts of the coin's relief. So the nose of the royal profile turned red. He was called the Red Nose by the people. Kings began treating the alchemists poorly. Maria Siglaine paid with her life, when the Duke of Luxembourg burned her in a cage. Sometimes the chemist was also killed. So, in France, Jean Barillo, who developed an amalgam process of gilding, was burned. The process principle was to apply a solution of gold and mercury to a metal, then the solution was heated, the mercury would evaporate, leaving a thin gold coating on the metal. Alchemists resorted to all sorts of tricks. Some of them believed that the prophets of Israel knew all the secrets of obtaining gold and therefore began to call themselves by their names, so that the souls of the prophets of Israel would help them. I have told you this story in order to move on to the story of the Parisian notary, Nicolas Flamel, 1330 to 1418. One of my mother's great-grandmothers, your great-grandmother, comes from this notary's family. I received this ring from her and gave it to your grandmother Esther. The grandfather continued the story. Until the age of 50, this notary was poor, and suddenly became rich. My mother told me that he bought an ancient book from a second-hand bookseller, the Book of the Jew Abraham. By the way, such a book is listed in the catalogue of Secret Philosophical Books, compiled by Dr. Pierre Borelli in 1654. At the same time, Borelli points out that the book was last seen in the hands of Cardinal Richelieu, who gave orders to search Flamel's house, although he had long since died. The fact is that somewhere in the margins of this book, there are Flamel's handmade notes in Hebrew about the cultivation of gold. Dr. Pierre Borelli translated the book from Hebrew into French. Cardinal Richelieu could not understand Flamel's notes. Dr. Pierre Borelli left a description of this book. The tablet itself is not preserved and most likely was not emerald, but malachite. Malachite was mined in the Negev mines near the village of Timna. This text is considered by occultists to be the most concise and succinct explanation of the principles of alchemy. It says, "What is above is like what is below, and what is below is like what is above. All things are created according to the plan of the one Creator, they are derived from the condensation of energy, They are generated by the sun and moon, they are carried out by the wind and are nourished by the earth. The secret of power lies in the power of light, and if you want to gain this power you must separate the earth from fire, separate the dense from the subtle, and all darkness will depart from you. The text on the tablet could not be better liked by the alchemists, who saw a recipe for making alchemical gold in it. Gnostic philosophers read it into a recipe for improving human spirituality. Doctors considered it a recipe for the elixir of eternal youth, also known as the philosopher's stone. In the field of manufacturing artificial gold, the alchemists in the East were the most successful. They identified gold with the sun, and silver with the moon. Mercury was considered liquid silver and it was obtained by heating red cinnabar. Alchemists used the recommendations of the emerald tablet, Jewish alchemy, and fused zinc with copper and obtained the so-called tompak brass. These alloys were no different in color from gold, they were lighter than gold, but, alas, they quickly became covered with a green coating, faded, and had to be polished again with animal pelts to get a golden shine. When people learned to distinguish gold from these alloys, they realized that not all is gold that glitters. Tompak brass was only superficially similar to gold, but its specific gravity was much lighter. It took, however, the genius of Archimedes to use this property of gold to solve the problem of estimating its quantity in the crown of King Gideon of Syracuse. It seemed strange that you could heat a red stone cinnabar and from there a silvery liquid mercury would flow. So why not find a stone from which the gold would flow? Well, if not from the stone itself, then with the help of the stone, the alchemists believed. It must be said that some progress has been made in extracting gold from the land containing it. So, Posidonius, while melting Spanish gold sand with the earth, Stypteria, which is presumably silver oxide, alum and iron vitriol, he got an alloy of silver with gold. However, attempts to artificially obtain gold did not bring success, although from time to time rumors of success were spread. So, Pastor François Prelati assured the Baron Jules de Rice, Bluebeard, that he knows the way of getting gold. But to do this, he needs the blood of young girls. The avaricious and voluptuous Baron agreed to the monk's diabolical offer. Any power is based on two measures, the army and gold. How many crimes it witnesses, being a universal measure of the value of goods. Gold is specifically called noble. It brings an emotional color to this creation. Gold is found in its native form, it does not need to be extracted from the ore by chemical means like silver. Therefore, man has known gold a long time ago. Greek Argonauts in Colchis mined gold in the rivers of the Caucasus. They came there by ship, leaving animal furs in the river currents, so that in a year they would come again for the harvest. The furs were pulled out of the water, dried and burned, and the gold left there by the current of the waters was extracted from the ashes. Chemistry, in Hebrew, and the word alchemy was formed by adding the prefix al, aleph, the full name of the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, to emphasize the primacy, the importance of this science, before ordinary chemistry. From Kabbalah, it is known that the letter aleph means God, pronounced El, so prayers and spells in alchemical experiments are important. Ancient alchemists used the recommendations of the Emerald Tablet, Jewish alchemy, which was found in Hebron by the wife of the biblical patriarch Abraham, Sarah. The mysterious Emerald Tablet disappeared long before our days. And not one of who has spent a lifetime searching for and studying this mystical text has ever seen its original. All that remains is a reference to the fact that the text was carved on a plate of a huge emerald. Or, maybe, just on a green stone. According to some sources, it was engraved, but according to others, it just appeared by itself. The philosopher of the 1 to 2 centuries Apollonius of Tyana had a dream, in which he suddenly saw that the Emerald Tablet lies on the grave of Hermes Trismegistus. It was in a dream that he read it and remembered it. However, in the times of Apollonius of Tyana, no one remembered where Hermes' grave was located. However, in the 3rd century, a certain handwritten copy of the text from the Emerald Tablet was purchased in Egypt by a Greek Africanus for a huge sum of money. This list was sold to him with the assurance that it was written on papyrus personally by Apollonius of Tyana. However, despite the loss of the original Emerald Tablet, lists from the works of Apollonius of Tyana began to circulate in nearby countries. In Europe, interest in the Palestinian works of Apollonius of Tyana flared with the start of the Crusades. The recipe written in the Emerald Tablet has come down to us in translation from ancient Hebrew by the Arabs. This translation was made in the 8th century, and the Latin translation was made in the 12th century. You believe in some unusual properties of a ring with turrets. Tell me about the situations when it was manifested and how, if these properties exist. I addressed my question to my grandmother, after hearing a story about this ring from my grandfather. I can't tell you straight out that there were some magic situations, but I noticed signs that your grandfather and I associate with this ring. First of all, I've only worn this ring a few times. The first time was when we got married, and then a few times when I was sorting through my jewelry. Interestingly, despite whether the ring is on my finger or not, I can feel it on my finger all the time. It started from the moment I put it on for the first time and continues to this day. This feeling didn't go away even after I gave this ring to your mother. I am already used to this feeling, although it periodically increases and attracts my attention. After one situation, I began to treat this feeling very carefully, and I think I learned to understand it. Starting from the end of July 1941, the stations of the Kharkiv railway junction were subjected to massive air raids. We all believed that our army was strong and the war would end soon. The skin on my finger where I felt the ring at that time felt scalded. I did not understand what the reason was. I tried to treat it with ointments and physiotherapy. Nothing helped. I couldn't sleep because of it. But one night I was attacked by fear for my children and my husband. I suddenly began to demand that we leave everything and go as far inland as possible. Your grandfather resisted at first, but then gave in to me. The city was flooded with the wounded and refugees from the west. With the population growth there was a bread shortage and the speculations developed. There was a mass evacuation from the front line. There was no evacuation from Kharkiv yet. Your grandfather learned at the railway station that many people, fleeing from the horrors of war, go to Kazakhstan and some are sent to the harsh and arid desert on the Mangyshlak Peninsula. In those years, there was only one district on the peninsula, Mangystou. It belonged to the Guryev region. It consists of several villages and small towns. I don't know why, but I decided that we will go to the Mangyshlak Peninsula. In my mind, it was the end of the world. Your grandfather told me that there is a shortage of fresh water and constant winds with dust, and a fairly frosty winter. Then there were no modern cities, which are there now. They were built much later. But this only calmed me down. I thought that the war would not reach there. The most interesting thing is that when we got on the train going to Mangyshlak, my fingers stopped bothering me, my insomnia went away and my anxiety disappeared. Now that I think about it, I think it was a warning from above. After the war, when we returned, I found out what happened in Kharkiv after we left. Evacuation became possible only after obtaining an evacuation permit. By the end of August 1941, the city's population had increased from 900,000 to 1.5 million. The trains were being sent to the South Station every hour, but there were not enough of them. The Central Committee of the Communist Party of Ukraine and the government of Ukraine, which had been in Kharkiv since July, went to Kupiansk in early October, and then to Voronezh. Please note that the first resolution of the State Defense Committee of the USSR was Resolution number 681, on the evacuation of enterprises in Kharkiv and the Kharkiv region, and only a few days later, Resolution number 685, on the evacuation of women and children from Kharkiv, came out. A schedule for evacuation was approved, but it was not accurately executed. In fact, the implementation of Resolution number 685, on the evacuation of women and children from Kharkiv, was disrupted. At the time of the occupation of the city, the elderly, women and children made up to 78% of the population. People were sent out at the request of enterprises and organizations through the evacuation departments of the city and party management bodies of Kharkiv. First of all, party and management personnel, then specialists, as well as their family members, were evacuated. The people who did not receive permission to evacuate were mostly workers, teachers, and culture researchers. The evacuation of the Jewish part of the population was not carried out as organized, so a number of researchers now accuse the Soviet administration of condoning the tragedy of Drobytsky Yar. But here is a cheerful conclusion of the wartime USSR. As a result of the evacuation and the events held, Kharkiv was deprived of strategic importance as the largest industrial, scientific and transport center, and was prepared to surrender to the enemy with destroyed industrial, urban and transport infrastructure. The remaining population was condemned to starvation and death. My deep belief is that the ring warned me and our timely evacuation saved our lives. There were other situations that finally allowed me to believe this. German farmer George Stein, for reasons difficult to explain, whether moral or material, is one of the characters of my story. While I was meticulously studying the history of my family and the history of artifacts that have been preserved for hundreds of years by generations of my ancestors, I unexpectedly found documents confirming the connection of this farmer to my story. George Stein spent very large sums of money. He spent large amounts of personal money and many years of life searching for treasures that the Nazis stole during the war with the Soviet Union. For more than 20 years, George Stein studied documents, looked for witnesses to events, made inquiries and collected information little by little. An ordinary farmer can hardly cope with that kind of research work. But it was a familiar job for the son of a well-known, high-profile scientist, a researcher at the East Prussian Museum administration. Before the call-up to the Eastern Front, George helped his father in his scientific and research work. He wrote letters and requests, he systematized the received materials. This pre-war experience was useful to him when he was released to his homeland after captivity. George Stein returned to Prussia and decided to take up gardening and became a farmer. If he was interested in politics before the war, then after the captivity he was consciously not interested in all the political events taking place in the world. As a farmer, he was very unlucky, affected by the lack of previous experience of farming. His debts to the tax service grew. One day, over a beer, he read about the Soviet Union's search for the Amber Room in a newspaper. There was also an announcement about the search for missing monastic treasures. George Stein suddenly had an idea of how he could improve his financial situation. Stein started plotting his plan immediately. Letters from the financial department of the city of Winson encouraged him to work 20 hours a day. The experience gained from working with his father was priceless. George Stein established the places where Orthodox monastic valuables taken out during the war are located and stored. He then informed the Moscow Patriarchate of the results of his search in a letter. The answer was not long in coming. He was invited to Moscow. At the invitation of the Moscow Patriarchate, he came to Moscow. During the negotiations, he was promised that after providing the addresses of the places where the stolen treasures are stored, and as the treasures are returned, he will be paid amounts equal to the value of the returned treasures. The final agreement was to take place on Mount Athos. At the appointed time, George Stein arrives in Greece at the monastery on the Mount Athos. There they confirm the deal and he passes the results of his search to the priests. Finally, the addresses where the Orthodox Church treasures are located are named. It is the Icon Museum in the city of Recklinghausen, Westphalia. Stein also pointed out other addresses where valuables belonging to the Orthodox Church before the war are stored on the territory of Germany, including values exported from Belarus, gold and silver keys of Mogiliev, silver print, given to the city by Magdeburg Rite, the gold jewelry found in the excavations of Pompeii, the silver mace of the king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Sigismund vases. There was a famous Slutsk and 20 other Gospels, the icon of the Beliniki Mother of God of the 15th century covered with gems, Spa's Sky Dame in a frame 1670 and other image, in gold and silver gilt frames, decorated with diamonds, as well as 160 icons letters 13, 18th century by the Belarusian craftsman. Saint Euphrosyne's cross and diamond rings, George Kaniski's silver mitre, Catherine II's throne chair, Napoleon's sleigh, Boravikovsky's paintings, collections of Belarusian clothing, Agric's sword, Peter the Great's cup, and much more. The sum of only the first refunds were about 25 million rubles that the Moscow Patriarchate received. George Stein did not receive the promised remuneration. From the hands of the Patriarch of Moscow, he received the Order of the Russian Orthodox Church in the name of the Holy Equal to the Apostles Grand Prince Vladimir of the Second Degree. The Russian Orthodox Church simply did not respond to all of George Stein's requests for promised money. The further tragic fate of George Stein is known from the published stories of his son Gebhard. On March 3, 1983, George Stein's wife committed suicide. A notice came from the tax office that the family owed 200,000 marks. All his property was sold to pay off this debt. In the town of Altdorf, Lower Bavaria, George Stein committed suicide on August 21, 1987. He cut his stomach open with a scalpel. It is still not clear if that it was a murder or suicide. German farmer George Stein, for reasons difficult to explain, whether moral or material, is one of the characters of my story. After his death, there was a large archive consisting of more than 50,000 microfilms, copies of various documents and a unique device that allows you to read even the most damaged documents. This archive was purchased by unknown persons from his son. The future fate of the archive is unknown. A usual business day. I was finishing up with my patients, and I was planning to pick up my wife at her work. Everything was as usual. Nothing foreshadowed the events that changed the rest of our lives. The heart center where my wife worked was not far from the hospital where I worked, almost on the way to our house. The children were at school, and we planned to stop at the store on the way home and buy groceries. Everything was as usual until we opened the front door and entered the house. First impression was that the house was visited by thieves. Everything is upside down, shifted. In general, a complete mess. However, nothing is broken or shattered. As it turned out later, nothing was stolen. We decided not to call the police. It was the 4th year of perestroika. The country was collapsing, the rules and concepts on which generations of people grew up were destroyed and broken. If some elders still remembered a different life, the generation of our parents and my wife's generation grew up under the Soviet regime. Collectivization and industrialization, 5-year plans, fish days, political information, Oktyabrennik, Pioneer, Komsomol were the stages of our lives. Lives under the leadership of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. We could not imagine any other life. We could not travel abroad on a tourist visa, because the last name and the 5th column, nationality, in the passport created an insurmountable obstacle. Even during perestroika, the fear of the police and other authorities was still very strong. My profession gave me the opportunity to personally know and communicate with many authorities, many were treated by me. The Russian proverb, "Don't have 100 rubles, but have 100 friends" sounded different in our relationship. Have 100 rubles and 100 people you need and everything in your life will be fine, sounded more like it. Sometimes you have to pay for the service with money, but more often you have to pay with the capabilities of your profession, to perform incognito-urological, sexual or venereological treatment. All issues in the Soviet Union were resolved through personal contacts. My phone book had hundreds of phone numbers of people who had the ability to solve various issues. My work phone number was in their phone books. I didn't want to pry. It is better when someone is in debt to you, and any conversion is a debt to them. In addition, contacting the police means giving them the opportunity to conduct another search of my house under the pretext of studying and searching for traces of criminals. I have already had some experience. In the book, The Ring of King Solomon, I wrote about the time when we were buying a house and my wife and I were deceived, and how my contacts with the right people in the police helped us solve this issue. Women choose men, and the saddest thing is that in modern society, women completely lack understanding of the value of family and union with a man. Desire for material values, egoism and mercantilism completely prevail. Beauty is a feminine quality of personality. It is shown on two levels: the external attractiveness of the physical body and internal beauty. It is charm and appeal. Inner beauty is the beauty that reflects the inner world of a woman, her psychic energy. The highest beauty of a woman is the spiritual essence of a woman. Beauty as an external display is intended for the individual of the opposite sex to pay attention to a woman. Why the discussion? Cruel are the laws of nature. Beauty is a way of attracting, manipulating, clouding the brain, blocking the main thought processes. Beauty is a way of manipulating the consciousness of the male individual, which is built in by nature. When I was given this ring, I already knew that it increases the attractiveness of the woman who owns it. Therefore, in the tradition of our family, there are no divorces. What is female beauty? Beauty is a positive property of character, an external and internal display of the harmony and physical health. Simple and clear relationships between men and women, feelings, emotions, true love. The highest beauty of a woman is the spiritual essence of a woman. A woman must be beautiful. Beauty is soothing. Women's responsibilities in particular include calming the chaotic thoughts of men. Therefore, to be beautiful, for a woman is the same duty as raising children, cooking, washing and cleaning the premises. The straightforward and responsible role of the women is the family movement to happiness. The correct understanding of these truths, for the woman herself, is very important in this matter. A large ship called the family moves under the control of only the power of love, trust, and loyalty. A woman must inspire a man to personal growth. In the external world there is competition and rivalry, selfishness and self-interest. A man needs a woman's energy of inspiration to achieve something. Masculinity is clearly visible under the influence of the energy of femininity. The beauty of a woman is proportional to her femininity, the ability to show a certain group of female personality traits, by which others accurately determine how much a woman has realized her own nature. The ring helps a woman get closer to perfection. The owner of the ring shows their perfection by showing the beauty and at the same time an internal appeal. To please the eye, to meet the ideas of the beautiful, delicious and harmonious is the first approach to perfection. At the same time, the beauty of a woman can be compared to a flower. Everything in the material world is temporary, everything ages and dies. Fighting against time is useless. You need to accept the fact that external beauty fades with time. Artifacts usually have useful properties for a person. They normalize your health, protect from negative effects, establish family or business affairs, etc. Artifacts enhance the energy of the body and mind, activate vision, accelerate the development of consciousness. In the normal state, people perceive the world in 3 dimensions, and with the development of consciousness, the ability to perceive the world expands, so intuition is the ability to perceive space, time and events in them. The vision of the probability of future events is not given to everyone. Unusual properties of a ring with turrets. Tell me about the situations when it was manifested and how, if these properties really exist. I addressed my question to my grandmother, after hearing her story about this ring. This ring not only strengthens your intuition, but also allows you to see the probability of future events. This ring allows a woman to understand the power of female beauty. Most men, of course, realize that they are under the influence of a woman, a wife or a lover, a mother or a sister, but they never oppose such influence, because they are reasonable enough to understand that they cannot be happy if they do not have caring and kind women around them. Men who fail to understand the importance and significance of this truth deprive themselves of the most powerful force that could further contribute to their success, in comparison to all the others combined. But an intelligent woman, knowing this masculine weakness, never makes it a subject of discussion or argument. A woman who understands the nature of a man and is able to tactfully and painlessly help him achieve family happiness, she cannot fear the competition from other women. Strong men with money, the powerful and the famous, they will never accept that they are influenced by women they claim to choose, because it is in the nature of men to think that they are singled out from all others. To please women is an innate need of men, and the realization of this desire gives women the power with which women can both destroy and elevate a man. Remove the desired woman from a man's life and all wealth will become meaningless and useless for him. The greatest motivating force for a man is his desire to please a woman. Beauty for a man is a promise of happiness. Beauty in the full sense of the word makes a man want to patronize and protect a woman. The desire to please remained exactly the same as it was at the dawn of civilization. The only thing that has changed is the way and methods of doing so. The nature of men has not changed at all. The current man does not bring home the furs of the predators he killed, but indicates his desire to please a woman with a choice of beautiful clothes, a comfortable car and many others. Are you ready to help us? What ancient things are you talking about? This is the first time I've heard of it. Who keeps them? My wife and I have never heard of anything like this in our family. The priest chuckled. He liked my reaction and response. He felt that he had chosen the right conversation with me. He decided that he had scared me enough, now it was time to start seducing me. If you find out which member of your family has antiquities stored, let me know, we are ready to pay a lot of money for them to you personally. I replied that for me these antiquities, which I did not know about, do not know and do not want to know about, are of no value. But I want a lot of money. How much money are we talking about? I asked. There was a spark of disbelief in priest's eyes, but only a spark, and I felt him relax and calm down. His answer did not surprise me. The price can go from tens of thousands of rubles to hundreds of thousands of rubles. It all depends on what antiquities you will discover. I made a very interested face expression. His answer reassured me that either he didn't know what he was looking for, or he didn't know everything. I didn't get a specific answer to all my questions about what exactly I should be looking for. We met twice more. As the Ukrainians say, I played a fool, explained to him that I carefully asked relatives. That I'm looking for it, but there are no results yet. But this first meeting finally convinced my wife and me to speed up immigration from the USSR. Thank God I lived up to my family's trust. I have not only saved everything, but also completely moved it without losses. My wife put the dinner on the table and they started talking. The first question they asked was, did something go missing or do you suspect that your neighbor might have stolen anything? I correctly understood their question, and answered, yes, I lost 2 spare wheels for the car. They were lying near the fence. I think my neighbor stole them. I was asked to write a statement. We sat and drank and ate a little more, and they said goodbye and left. The next day, at night, my doorbell rang. These same guys came, they climbed over the fence to a neighbor, and as I understand it, they searched his house. The neighbor was not at home. In the morning I saw them take him out of the gate in handcuffs and put him in a police car. The neighbor returned a day later. Within a month, he sold his house and I never saw or heard from him again. This experience was priceless for me. So I decided not to contact the police. They won't find the person who broke into our house, but they will search it carefully. After this search, I can remain their debtor for life. It's been about a month since the break-in, and we've stepped up our security. We put iron shutters on the windows and iron doors on the outside. But an event occurred that made us remember what happened again. I was already finishing my appointment at the clinic, and the last patient who had made an appointment was still there. When he came in I saw that it was a priest. Before that, I had never had to consult priests. He said he had a very personal question and wanted to talk to me in private. I usually had a nurse present at my patient appointments. She wrote out my appointments, performed the necessary manipulations that I assigned. The nurse is an indispensable assistant when receiving patients. I explained to the patient the role of the nurse at the reception, why her presence is necessary, and if she leaves, I will not be able to provide him with proper care, to do a cystoscopy, to get the necessary brush strokes or other manipulation, to enter the contrast, to write a prescription for tests, medications and more. The priest said it wouldn't be necessary. This is a very personal question. I was very intrigued. I allowed the nurse to go home, especially since the appointment was already over, and this was the last patient. I thought that if necessary, I can deal with this myself. I saw that the nurse went home and left the workplace reluctantly, probably surprised and interested in the behavior of an unusual patient. The priest began the conversation, looking at me intently. We have been watching your family for a long time, and we know that you have some antiquities that should be handed over to us. They would not be transferred for free. We'll pay well. Our possibilities are endless, but our patience is running out. I will repeat myself briefly. The house we bought was the first house we bought in the city of Kharkiv. Before that, I worked outside the city as the chief doctor of a hospital, and as a doctor I was entitled to a free state apartment or house. We bought a house in the city of Kharkiv when my wife finished studying at the university and we decided to move to the city. It was a good house made of stone in a good location. The salesman, as I realized later, was a very experienced liar. A few years before the sale to us, he bought a large chunk of land along with this house. On this site, he built a small house. After that, he divided the property into 2 households. He sold us a large house, but the plan did not indicate the boundary of the land belonging to us. We were inexperienced and didn't notice it. We liked the house, it was the first house we bought, and we let our guard down. We started to make repairs in the house. On May 9th, the day of victory in the war against the Nazis, my children and I went to our parents and decided to spend the night there. We were surprised and rightfully outraged when we returned home. Our part of the land was fenced off by a high fence. Moreover, the fence stood along the line that cuts off a large piece of land in front of our house. Moreover, the neighbor himself has changed dramatically, constantly swearing over the fence. He could have thrown garbage over the fence on our property. As I later realized, his plan was to make our life in this house impossible, and according to his understanding we had to sell the house and leave. No one wants to live with bad neighbors. According to him, we as an intelligent Jewish family do not want to get involved with him. We will be afraid for our children and for ourselves and leave. I am very grateful to this neighbor. Thanks to him, I have gained invaluable experience in relations with law enforcement agencies. I had never contacted the police before. In my phone book, I found the phone number of the head of the passport department of the police in my district. Once she came to me, I helped her, and she offered to help me if I needed it. I called her, and we set up a meeting at her district police station. When I told her about my problem, she called someone and asked for a meeting. We went up to the 2nd floor to the office of the chief of the criminal police department. He was a colonel in the militia. He listened carefully and promised to solve this problem. The lady who brought me there left us alone, because our further conversation was mostly about the health and diseases of the chief and his relatives. We exchanged contact numbers with him and parted as friends who needed one another. The next day, 2 plainclothes criminal investigation officers came to my house in the evening. We sat down with them at a table on the porch. If the personality and inner core of a woman is formed correctly, external beauty grows into internal beauty. An internally beautiful, chaste woman will always be desirable for her man. He will always think that the most beautiful woman on earth is the one who is next to him. The superficial mind understands beauty only as external beauty. This is an important, but far from the most important and only aspect of beauty. Beauty without inner content is dead. Therefore, the beauty of a woman is just a reflection of the inner harmony of the individual and physical health. There is no beauty without femininity and chastity. To be beautiful, a woman must show the best qualities of her personality. Nature has endowed every woman with a full set of feminine personality traits. The purpose of a woman is to reveal them to the full. When I accepted this ring, I promised my husband, your grandfather, to be a good and kind wife. This has been the case for thousands of years and hardly anything has changed, because the people are the same. Emancipation, self-sufficiency, these are empty words. I am grateful to the ring for helping me understand my purpose. Chastity is the ability to be faithful to your husband, to establish close and intimate relationships with him, to treat him with respect and benevolence to his relatives and friends, to inspire and help your husband in his business, to share happy and bitter moments of life with your husband. The inner beauty of a woman is her purity. A pure, chaste woman is a faithful associate and helper for her husband. According to all spiritual traditions, she willingly or unwittingly communicates with God. There are many reliable facts confirming that the wife's fidelity saved her husband from death or averted trouble from him. We must remember that if the inner beauty is already lost, it is not restored. The grandmother smiled and continued her story. I've already told you how the ring kept us alive during the war with the Nazis. I'd rather tell you about King Solomon. When Solomon ascended to the throne, he swore to be a just and wise ruler. But it was always impossible to fulfill the promise, because it was very emotional. Often, anger or joy influenced his decisions and led to incorrect judgments. The king turned for help to the high priest, who gave Solomon a ring with the inscription, "Everything has already happened, and this will pass." In moments of intense anger or supreme joy, Solomon looked at this inscription. So the king did it every time, and always the inscription on the ring helped him understand the transience of time. Therefore, the king never removed this ring from his finger. Solomon ruled his people wisely and remained grateful to the wise man who gave him the ring. Years passed. Solomon's endless life path was moving toward completion. He knew that he would soon pass into another world. A great longing touched the king. He became thoughtful, and as he looked at the ring, he realized that it could no longer console him. This only increased his sadness. The king recalled past achievements, evaluated the years of his reign, and reread the inscription on the ring. He understood that the time of his reign and all his successes and achievements were only a moment in fleeting time. One day, his desperation made him rip the ring off his finger. Suddenly, on the ring that was so familiar to him to the last crack and chink, Solomon saw another inscription on the inner side, but something remains. The king laughed, for he had never taken the sage's gift off his finger, and ordered it to be buried with the ring, in order to perpetuate the wisdom that had been given to him. But something remains. Yes, all our successes and achievements are just a moment in fleeting time. But there is something that is timeless. Something that passes from generation to generation. There is a thing like that in my family. This is something that is inextricably linked to the history of my family and my ancestors. In my previous two books, The Ring of King Solomon and The Hebrew Stone, I have described the relics that are kept and passed down from generation to generation in my family. Not only these relics influenced every generation of my family, but also absorbed the energy of those generations themselves. Thanks to these relics, this energy is transmitted in our family from generation to generation. The myths of different nations mention many different artifacts that have become part of modern culture. Some of them can be seen in museums, others are found during excavations, and others people still hope to find. I started this book with a story about artifacts. Which of the artifacts may actually still exist, and which are just folk fiction, it is difficult to find out. The real artifacts may well be right in front of our eyes. You can get an ancient artifact that will serve for the benefit of its owner only by inheritance, or as a gift from a teacher. And to use it correctly, you need to have a special secret knowledge, which can also be obtained only from the teacher or by inheritance. The uninitiated should avoid searching for such items on their own. To the uninitiated, such an artifact can be of great harm. The Gig's ring was mentioned by the ancient philosopher Plato in his writings. According to the legend, a poor shepherd Gig once found a tomb in a secret cave and took a gold ring from the finger of the body that was resting in it. Realizing that this ring is magic and can make him invisible, once an honest shepherd entered the palace, seduced the queen, and then killed the king and took his place. Book of Thoth. This book, according to the attributes, gives the ability to understand animals and gods, influence living people and raise the dead. The god Thoth is also mentioned by the ancient philosopher Plato as an educator who taught the Egyptians literacy, astronomy, and geometry. Who is Longinus, and why do Christians attribute great power to his spear, while at the same time considering it one of the greatest relics? This pike is also called the Spear of Christ. According to the Gospel of John, the Savior crucified on the cross was killed with this spear. According to legend, the owner of this spear can get power over all mankind, and at one time it was held by the hands of Attila, Justinian I, Charlemagne, Henry IV. An ancient legend says that the Chintamani stone, which many consider the Eastern philosopher's stone, was brought to our world from the constellation of Orion. From Sanskrit, the name of the stone is translated as the jewel of thought, and it can fulfill the wishes of the one who finds it. The British Museum also holds another rare antique glass vessel, known as the Lycurgus cup. It is named so because it depicts the death of the Thracian king Lycurgus, who was entangled and strangled by vines for insulting the wine god Dionysus. A unique feature of the cup is that it can change color depending on the lighting and the drink that is poured into it. Scientists have long tried to solve the mystery of the cup and found out that the glass is literally impregnated with silver and gold particles, the size of which is about 50 nanometers in diameter. Neither historians nor physicists have any idea how nanotechnology was applied in ancient times. The Holy Grail is a relic that is not mentioned in sacred texts. But according to popular legends, the Holy Grail is the cup from which Jesus Christ ate at the Last Supper and where the blood was collected from his wounds after the crucifixion. It is true that the description of the Last Supper in the Bible says that Jesus drank from a certain cup, but it is given no more attention than any other element of the legendary scene. However, the Holy Grail is popularly credited with incredible power. As a significant object, it is first mentioned in the epic about the British King Arthur and his knights. But it was given special power by the poet Chrétien de Troyes in his novel, Perceval, or The Legend of the Grail, 1181–1191. Since then and up to the present day, the Holy Grail has been mentioned many times in works of art. Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, other names the Ark of the Highest, the Ark of the God of Israel, the Ark of the Covenant of God, the Ark of Power, is the greatest shrine of the Jewish people. The Torah says that it contains the stone tablets of the covenant with the 10 Commandments. The Torah also specifies that the Ark is a symbol of God's union with the people of Israel. There I will meet with you and speak with you above the cover between the 2 cherubim that are over the Ark of the Testimony, about all that will be commanded by thee to the children of Israel, the instructions of the Lord to Moses in Exodus describes. It is known that the Ark of the Covenant was kept in the Holy of Holies of the Tabernacle of the Congregation, Camp Temple, then, in the Holy of Holies of the Jerusalem Temple. The last mention of it in the Holy Scriptures is during the reign of the Jewish king Josiah, 640–609 BC, when he was in the Temple of Jerusalem. A few decades later, in 586 BC, this temple was destroyed and the Ark disappeared. Its further fate is unknown and has been agitating the minds of scientists for many centuries. It is believed that the Ark has supernatural power and gives almost unlimited power to the one who owns it. The unworthy may perish from the mere touch of this relic. In the late 1980s, on the border between Israel and Syria, several hundred distant relatives of cannonballs used by the Roman Empire to destroy enemy defenses were discovered. According to records, the ancient city of Gamla was taken by the Romans after its walls were destroyed, with 9,000 residents choosing to commit suicide by throwing themselves into the gorge. No one noticed any losses until 2015, when 2 ballista cores were suddenly found in the courtyard of the museum in the morning. Next to them was a note: "These are 2 balls from the Roman ballistae from Gamla. I stole them in July 1995 and since then they have brought me nothing but trouble. Please don't steal the antiques." Pom Hamsa to this day remains a popular amulet of magical protection from envy and the evil eye. In addition, it also brings positive energy, happiness, wealth and health. Hamsa, the root of the word means 5, includes 5 parts and symbolizes the protecting hand of the Creator, and, of course, 5 fingers on the hand. An alternative Hebrew name for this item is the hand of Miriam, the sister of Moshe and Aaron. On some palms there is an image of a fish, the water hides the fish and it is not visible to the eye, Barakot 55b. Some of the palms are painted red and blue, colors that avert the evil eye. The symbol of the hand, often the hand of the Kun, appears in Kabbalistic manuscripts and amulets. In ancient and medieval times, it was believed that the Jews had a lot of knowledge about magic, amulets and spells for healing diseases and harming enemies, spells that help ascend to heaven or summon angels to earth. There was information that the Jews had the angels help them overcome the demons of illness and madness. For many years, Jewish magic has been a part of popular Jewish knowledge, as well as the elite practice of rabbis. I know from my father, mother and grandparents, that the artifacts that are passed on in our family show their special properties only under certain conditions. Ring of Solomon brings prosperity only if the money is not spent for evil. The Jewish stone also brings wealth and prosperity only to those who follow the path indicated in the Torah in life. A ring with 3 towers behind the fence brings peace and prosperity to the family. Editor's note: a brief history of wedding rings from a mid-Victorian perspective. This article first appeared in Appleton's Journal of Popular Literature, Science, and Art in July of 1869. From a recent work, by Edward J. Wood, on The Wedding Day in All Ages and Countries, we glean a few interesting facts in reference to the wedding ring. The use of the ring, both in betrothal and marriage, seems to be of very old date. Among the ancient Hebrews, the selection of a bride, always made by the parents of the lover, was followed by an espousal, which was confirmed by oaths and accompanied by presents. These gifts were probably the origin of the gift of the ring. In the first meeting of the servant of Isaac and Rebekah, he seeks her favor by the present of a massive earring and 2 bracelets. After the consent of her parents, there were more costly gifts, jewels of silver, and jewels of gold, and raiment. In later days, it was the custom for the bridegroom to place a ring upon the finger of the intended bride. It is not certain how early this custom began. There is no mention in the Bible of betrothal finger rings, but, in Genesis lie. 42, a ring is mentioned as a token of fidelity or friendship, and, in Luke 15:22, of adoption. No reference to rings was made by the Talmudists, and these is an opinion that they were not used in the Mosaic days, but came in at a later period as an economical substitute for dowry money. The modern Jews still attach more moment to the breaking of glass, not as a bond of union, but a suggestion that the union is irrevocable, as the damage to the crystal, also as a suggestion of the frailty of life, and a portent of the punishment of infidelity. Whatever may be the fact as to the use of marriage rings in the Bible days, says the author, monkish legends relate that Joseph and Mary used one, and moreover, that it was of onyx or amethyst. It was said to have been discovered in the year 996, when it was given by a jeweler from Jerusalem to a lapidary of Clusium, who had been sent to Rome by the wife of a marquis of Etruria, to make purchases for her. The jeweler told the lapidary of the preciousness of the relic, but he despised it, and kept it for several years among other articles of inferior value. However, a miracle revealed to him its genuineness, and it was placed in a church, where it worked many curative wonders. In 1473, it was deposited with some Franciscans at Clusium, from whom it was stolen, and ultimately it found its way to Perugia, where a church was built for it, and it still performed miracles, but they were, as Hone says, trifling in comparison with its miraculous powers of multiplying itself. It existed in different churches in Europe at the same time, and, each ring being as genuine as the others, it was paid the same honors by the devout. In modern Greece there are 2 rings used, gold for the bridegroom, and silver for the bride, which are frequently interchanged by the 2 in token of union and of domestic equality, the higher value of the ring of the husband, however, still marking his superiority. In the time of Pliny, an iron ring was sent as a pledge to the intended bride. These iron rings were set with adamants, the hardness and durability of both iron and stone signifying the perpetuity of the contract. Juvenal states that, during the imperial period, the man gave a gold ring in token of his fidelity to his betrothed, and that she wore it as now, on the finger next to the small one. Tertullian speaks of them in his day. Isidore says that women wore only this ring, or not more than two, at most. Some nuptial rings were of brass, and some of copper. The plain circle was not the only form of wedding ring, as some were carved in devices, such as a key, to signify the domestic authority of the wife. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the Italians used betrothal rings, which were generally of silver, inlaid with niello. The bezel was oval or circular, and the shoulders of the hoop formed sleeves from which issued hands that clasped. The medieval Italians esteemed the diamond for espousal rings, from its supposed power of maintaining concord between husband and wife. The Irish peasantry have a general impression that marriage without a gold ring is not legal. In former days, girls in the mountain regions were often married at 12 and 13. The women thought that bracelets of hair, given to the husband, were charms of certain efficacy in love. Near the Loch of Stennis, in the Orkneys, are two large circles, sacred to the sun and moon. Only 100 years ago, a maiden, who wished to be married, performed alone the circuit of stones dedicated to the moon, and the intended husband traversed the circle of the sun. Then the pair met at the stone of Odin, and, joining their hands through the matrimonial ring or hole in the stone, plighted their faith, and became man and wife. A divorce was more simple, as the pair had only to go to church, and go out at different doors. Among the Anglo-Normans, the ring was always worn on the middle finger of the right hand, while in the latter part of the 17th century the wedding ring was often worn on the thumb. The Quakers reject the ring as a remnant of pagan superstition, and in the time of the Commonwealth the Puritans endeavored to abolish it for the same reason. Although a ring is absolutely necessary in a Church of England marriage, it may be of any metal, and of any size. Some years since, a ring of brass was used at Worcester at a wedding before the registrar, who was threatened with proceedings for not compelling a gold to be employed. A story is told of two paupers, who came to the church and requested to be married with the church key, as the parochial authorities had not furnished them with a ring. The clerk, feeling some delicacy about using the key, fetched an old curtain ring from his own house, and with that article the marriage was celebrated. The church key was used in lieu of a wedding ring at a church near Colchester, early in the present century, and that was not a solitary instance within the past 100 years in England. The Duke of Hamilton was married at Mayfair with a bed curtain ring. Notes and Queries for October, 1860 relates that a ring of leather, cut transversely from a finger of the bridegroom's glove, was used as a substitute for the wedding ring on one occasion. A clergyman unjustifiably stopped a wedding in India, because the bridegroom offered a diamond ring instead of the kind generally in use. In Iceland, the betrothal and the marriage were both confirmed by money, and the ring seemed little needed in evidence where value received for the maiden was supposed to be paid in cash. It was used there, however, but could hardly be called a finger ring, being variously formed of bone, jet, stone, gold and silver, and sometimes it was so wide as to allow the palm of the hand to be passed through it. In the solemnization of betrothal, the bridegroom passed 4 fingers in his palm through one of these rings, and in this manner he received the hand of his bride. Wearing the ring on the 4th finger of the left hand is due to the belief of the ancients that a vein of that finger ran directly to the heart, and that the nuptial sign was thus joined to the seed of life. The fact that the soft metal is less worn or injured on the finger of that hand may have much to do with it. It is said, however, that the ring originally worn among the Anglo-Normans on the right hand of the bride was changed to the left, or inferior hand, in token of subjection. The particular finger is also said to be favored from an old custom of placing the ring on the 1st finger in the name of the Father, on the 2nd in the name of the Son, and on the 3rd in the name of the Holy Ghost. This usage probably grew up at the time of the Arian controversy. One of the earliest and prettiest forms of betrothing rings was the gemelle ring, once used by the Anglo-Saxons, and probably derived from the French or Normans. It was of 2 or 3 links, fastened on a hinge, and joining in one ring. Sometimes, when the 2 flat sides and the central ribbon joined, there were male and female's hands to clasp at the union. A heart above these signified love, fidelity, union. At betrothal, the man and woman were often actually linked by a finger in each end of the 3-hooped chain, and then, severing them, each kept the part held, and the witness the third, until all became the property of the bride of marriage. A gemmal ring of 9 interlaced loops still exists. These often had posy verses upon the flat inner surface. Fictitious rings of rushes were once used in England to delude girls into a mock marriage. A bishop of Salisbury, in 1217, put a stop to the sport by declaring the rush ring contract legal. An old writer says, "Well, 'twas a good world, when such simplicity was used," says the old women of our time, when a ring of a rush would tie as much love as a gimmen of gold.